Go to download.
Wait, why share the screen?
Not this one. This one you just film it. You will not now. Now first this video playing. Close this. Escape auto. Escape auto.
Can that go there? Well, if somebody's here, like watch the videos, maybe it's nice to have videos. So that's the
Share screen and keep it ready.
This is it'll capture it. So
This one.
let's not move all this. This is all set. So
Then the big one.
do you have another stand? We can turn up the level. They'll here. We can do this, man. It says no. Thing. Hold on.
So you face this or this? Will you face this or this one?
Everybody's going to be here, right? So you face forward.
So we'll see your back then, right? We'll see your back.
When you are singing, you are on a stage.
We will see your back. Does that make sense?
Right. And then you
Yeah, reverse.
turn around. Oh, okay.
Or put a picture of your face on your back.
If they turn around, they can't use it.
But you have script.
Script is here.
It is here. They
Oh.
want to.
Doesn't matter.
But what about sideways?
No,
Like, Jyoti,
it's
what
the-
about sideways? Like your back to the wall.
Yeah, like that.
Then
Oh, right.
monitor.
The monitor will shift a little. It's not a big deal.
We could shift it if you
But
want.
quick.
The monitor there.
Huh?
To there.
Yeah, it can come here also.
Okay. Then we can turn this way.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
you-
why don't we'll play the video and then move it or something? Or just move it now?
Move it now. Not that time.
Is there a plug around here? That's always the
There's
issue.
plug there.
Only for now, we have computer, then we should be able to see.
See, audience, to face the audience.
All of us face. That's an option.
No, that's not the way, you know. Like,
Okay.
yeah. Baba Sagar, that you have book. Baba Sagar in
I have
Sanskrit.
you guys don't have.
Maybe we should just leave.
Another option is I'll keep my computer here and
Ah, yes.
That can be done.
then everybody.
So, yeah, please.
That's easier than-
Shift a little bit. Yeah.
Oh,
Can you, yes, see, can you bring? say,
Hey,
2, 3
oh,
books?
it's-
They don't know Devanagari.
No, she knows. straight like this, not tilted.
This way?
More. Yeah, like this. Right.
But the thing's not focusing on anybody. That he's like zooming in and coming out.
Keep it there. In almost. Rather than that for this. That's what I mean.
But do I unmute the iPad or?
Is it time?
Huh?
Yes, come in.
Wait, what do I
So
open?
start.
Wait, do I open the?
Start the beginning. Share the audio, right? Yeah. Start.
Oh wait, do we have to be on?
Yeah, no, it was.
This unmute model.
I got, still got the time.
Where is
Like,
it?
upward book, in the book.
Hey, this is the.
See, it's on. but-
No, this is what this is my copy. I bought it after.
Can you find it?
It was gone. It's been moved.
How do you unpost it?
I placed it right next to the books on the upper shelf.
And have you seen this elders?
Yeah, we're gonna work on that later, yeah. I just found out about it this moment. So, whoop,
Two are there, one for Tom, one for.
is Tom here?
If it is open, you must have one.
Okay, what else? Yeah, okay, you want, does he want it in his room?
Who wants Balasagara?
Wait,
Does he
I'm
know
a
that he has it?
glad.
And,
Oh, so he knows about it. Okay.
Devanagari, you
It's not coming.
yes,
Right, Kevin? That's what it is.
okay, come back.
Should be fine.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. 1886, October. Calcutta, the then capital of India. A group of young men came to live together in a dilapidated house at Boranagur in North Calcutta. They were forsaken as some worthless, destitute boys. But they were molded by the ideas and ideals of their spiritual master, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa. Sri Ramakrishna had passed away a few months ago. But before that, he had instilled in them the love for God, the spirit of renunciation and brotherly love. One day, at the Kashipur garden house, Sri Ramakrishna distributed ochre robes to them and sent them out to beg food. In this way, he himself initiated them into a life of renunciation and laid the foundation of a new monastic order. The resolve of these youngsters to form a brotherhood was strengthened a couple of months later at Anpur on a Christmas Eve. In Baranagur Mutt, the days were of extreme struggle and hardship. They lived on what chance brought to them. But it could not shake their resolve. Sri Ramakrishna's words constantly rang in their ears. The goal of human life is God realization. Forgetting sleep, they spent the nights in spiritual practices. They immersed themselves in meditation. They studied various scriptures to quench their thirst for truth. Their love and longing for God found expression in their devotional songs. Under the able leadership of Swami Vivekananda, these young men took the vows of monasticism and started a monastic brotherhood in the name of Sri Ramakrishna. The determination of those young men has borne fruit in the form of Velur Math. Today, Velur Math has become the heart of the worldwide spiritual movement known as the Ramakrishna Movement. Once, Swami Vivekananda uttered these prophetic words about Velur Math. The blazing light of universal harmony that will emanate from here will flood the whole world. The middle of the 19th century, India had been occupied by foreigners for a long time. Indian culture and its values had got concealed under layers of ignorance. The West, however, saw rapid progress in the fields of science and technology, spearheaded by the Industrial Revolution. Discord prevailed among the followers of different faiths. The scientific spirit of inquiry shook religion and spirituality to their roots. The time was right for somebody to experimentally verify the fundamentals of spirituality and establish the very essential harmony of all religions. Sri Ramakrishna was born on the 18th of February 1836 in the village of Kamarpukur, about 60 miles from Calcutta. He had a spiritual disposition from his childhood and was disinclined towards formal education and worldly affairs right from his early days. In his youth, he was appointed a priest in Kali Temple at Dakshineshwar. God is worshipped here as the Divine Mother. Sri Ramakrishna developed a deep devotion towards her. His intense longing culminated in the vision of the Divine Mother. Sri Sarada Devi, popularly known as Holy Mother, was the spiritual consort of Sri Ramakrishna. She was born on 22nd of December 1853 in Joyrambati, a village in West Bengal. In due time, after her marriage with Sri Ramakrishna, she stayed with him in Dakshineshwar and served him as a devoted wife. They lived immaculately pure lives, and their relationship was entirely spiritual. She is regarded as the first disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Once, Sri Ramakrishna ritually worshipped Sarada Devi as the divine mother and thus awakened universal motherhood in her. Sri Ramakrishna's strong inner urge impelled him to follow various spiritual disciplines described in Hindu scriptures and realize God through them. He followed the paths of Islam and Christianity and attained the highest realization through each of them. His spiritual practices led him to realize oneness with God. He then habitually lived in an exalted state of consciousness, in which he saw God in all beings. Sri Ramakrishna expressed the quintessence of the realizations of his 12-year-long spiritual practices in a simple dictum: Jotomot, Totopod. As many faiths, so many paths. As bees swarm around a fully blossomed flower, devotees now started coming to Sri Ramakrishna in Dakshineshwar. There was another group of young boys who later became monks. The foremost among these young disciples was Swami Vivekananda. Narendranath Datta, who was later on known as Swami Vivekananda, was born in Calcutta in 1863. Swami Vivekananda was a prodigy endowed with many talents. He had acquired a vast knowledge of different subjects, including Indian and Western philosophy and history. At the threshold of youth, Vivekananda passed through a period of spiritual crisis. He was assailed by doubts about the existence of God. It was then that he first heard about Sri Ramakrishna. One day, Vivekananda's quest for truth brought him to the doorstep of Sri Ramakrishna. He asked Sri Ramakrishna straight away, "Sir, have you seen God?" The reply was, "Yes, just like I see you, only more intensely." Under the loving guidance of his master, Vivekananda blossomed into a spiritual luminary. Thus began the pure, unselfish guru-disciple relationship between them. In 1886, Sri Ramakrishna passed away, leaving his disciples in deep distress. Swami Vivekananda took up the responsibility of guiding his brother disciples. A dilapidated house in Boranagar was rented. This house became the first address of the monastic brotherhood known as Ramakrishna Mutt. There were 16 monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. The monastic tradition started by them combines some of the best elements of the Eastern and Western monasticism. Its emphasis on service, universal and modern outlook, synthesis of yogas, harmony of religions, and such other features make this tradition a distinctive one. The Ramakrishna Mutt was established, but Vivekananda's mission was not complete. He heard the inner call for a greater mission in his life. After staying in Boranagar monastery for about 2 years, he set out on a long journey as a mendicant monk for the exploration and discovery of real India. During his travels, he was deeply moved to see the appalling poverty and backwardness of the masses of India. It was clear to him that the real cause of India's downfall was the neglect of the masses. After traveling through the length and breadth of India, one day, Swami Vivekananda found himself on the southernmost tip of the country at Kanyakumari. Here, he meditated for 3 days and nights, and the complete picture of his future mission unfolded before him. Vivekananda realized that cultural exchange between the East and the West was vitally necessary. India will gift her spiritual wealth to the West, and in exchange, the West will share the knowledge of science and technology with India. Taking the Parliament of Religions as a God-given opportunity, he decided to sail to America in 1893. His speeches at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago made him famous as an orator by divine right and a messenger of Indian wisdom to the Western world. My ideal indeed can be put into a few words, and that is to preach unto mankind their divinity and how to make it manifest in every moment of life. Swami Vivekananda spent nearly 3 years in USA and England, spreading the spiritual wisdom of ancient India. In 1897, Swami Vivekananda returned to India. In response to the enthusiastic welcome that he received everywhere, he delivered a series of lectures in different parts of India, which created a great stir all over the country. Swami Vivekananda wanted to channelize this enthusiasm. He expressed, "My whole ambition in life is to set in motion a machinery which will bring noble ideas to the door of everybody." On 1st May 1897, the Ramakrishna Mission was founded by Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda also envisioned to have a separate women's monastic order with Holy Mother Sarada Devi as its ideal and inspiration. His wish for a separate women's monastic order came to be fulfilled nearly half a century later with the foundation of Sarada Mutt and Ramakrishna Sarada Mission at Dakshineshwar. The Ramakrishna Mutt shifted from Boranagar to Alam Bazar in North Calcutta in 1892. In the year 1898, it was shifted to Nilambar Mukherjee's garden house in Belur. Belur is situated on the western bank of the holy river Ganga, diagonally opposite Dakshineshwar. It was Vivekananda's dream to have a permanent abode for the monastery and to set up a unique temple dedicated to Sri Ramakrishna, from where his ideology and wisdom would continue to inspire humanity. To fulfill this dream, he acquired a plot of land at Belur. The main site was purchased on 4th of March 1898. On 27th February 1898, there was a celebration in Belur. A procession of monks and lay devotees walked to the newly acquired site. Vivekananda himself carried the urn containing the sacred relics of Sri Ramakrishna on his own shoulders. The urn was ceremonially worshipped, and Vivekananda prayed to his master to sanctify the place with his hallowed presence for the good of many and the happiness of the world. During his travels in India and abroad, Swami Vivekananda had visited many important historical places. And had keenly observed various architectural symbols, icons, and motifs. Swami Vivekananda shared his ideas and vision about the Ramakrishna Temple with his brother monk, Swami Vivekananda, who was a civil engineer in his pre-monastic life. Vivekananda pointed out the site for the temple and asked Vivekananda to prepare a plan. He prepared a plan and presented it to Swami Vivekananda, who was immensely pleased. But the work could not start immediately owing to paucity of funds. 4 decades later, substantial contributions came from 2 American admirers of the Ramakrishna Movement, Miss Helen Rubel, Bhakti, and Miss Anna Wachesta, Annapurna. The construction finally began in 1935. 14th of January 1938. Finally, the day dawned when the temple was open to all, amidst grand celebrations in which people from India and abroad took part. Swami Vivekananda enshrined the pot containing the sacred relics of Sri Ramakrishna in the new temple, thus fulfilling the long-cherished dream of Swami Vivekananda. More than 100 years have passed since the inception of the Ramakrishna Movement and Ramakrishna Mission. During this time, the organization has spread in many parts of India and several countries abroad. Sprawling over more than 40 acres of land on the western bank of the Holy Ganga, Belur Mutt is an hour's drive from Kolkata. This is a place of pilgrimage for people from all over the world, professing different religious faiths. The archway at the entrance of the campus from Grand Trunk Road displays the harmony of religions. The asphalted road leading is lined with trees on both sides. The lush green campus is a unique combination of serenity and sanctity. Swami Vivekananda envisioned the Ramakrishna Temple as a unique monument symbolizing the harmony of religions and harmony of cultures. The architecture incorporates features of a temple, a mosque, a church, and a Buddhist monastery. The temple itself is built in light buff sandstone, which is found in the temples of Khajuraho and the palaces of Rajasthan. The facade, or the front portion, reminds one of the Gopurams, the majestic towers of South Indian temples. Above the main entrance is an exquisite carving of the emblem of the Ramakrishna order, designed by Swami Vivekananda himself. The wavy waters in the emblem are symbolic of karma or selfless work, the lotus of bhakti or devotion, and the rising sun of jnana or knowledge. The encircling serpent represents yoga, while the swan stands for Paramatman or Supreme Self. The ideal of the emblem is that by the union of selfless work, devotion, knowledge, and yoga, the vision of the Supreme Self is obtained. Above the horseshoe arch encircling this emblem is a replica of a Shiva Linga, and on the two sides of the base of this arch are auspicious symbols of elephants with lotuses. The scroll endings above the double pillars at the two sides of the main entrance are similar to those in the Sachi Stupa, conveying Buddhist influence. The three umbrella-like domes on the top are built in Rajput and Mughal styles. The curvatures of the roofs resemble the thatched roofs of the village huts of Bengal, depicting the birthplace of Sri Ramakrishna. The windows, the balconies and the domes above the entrance gate are of old Mughal and Rajput fort style. The horseshoe arch and the large main arch of the main entrance have Buddhist influences. These are derived from the entrance of Ajanta's Buddhist caves and have a Gothic curve. As one walks through the main entrance, the eyes move down the row of columns on both sides to the deity sitting at the meeting point of parallel lines. The spacious prayer hall is distributed in three parts, like the Christian church. The arched ceiling and pillars are all reminiscent of the Buddhist caves in Chaitya Hall of Nasik, Mandulena. The richly ornamented capital of the long row of single and double pillars reminds one of the Orissa style. The beam above is supported by decorative brackets, like in South Indian temples. The projected balcony, supported from the beams by brackets, is similar to those at the palace at Fatehpur Sikri. The sanctum attached to the prayer hall reminds us of churches, especially the plan of St. Peter's Church in Rome. The connected sanctum and prayer hall is uncommon in traditional Indian temple architecture. Inside the sanctum is the marble statue of Sri Ramakrishna, sitting in meditation on a full-bloomed lotus, sculptured by the eminent Gopeshwar Pal. The rectangular altar below is designed by renowned artist Nandalal Bose. The front, left, and right sides of the altar have swans engraved on them. The swan represents the Supreme Self. The circumambulation path outside the sanctum
Om वन्दे जगद्बीजम् अखण्डमेकं वन्दे सुरैसेवितपादपीठं वन्दे भवेशं भवरोगवैद्यं तं एव वन्दे भुवि रामकृष्णं. My humble salutations to all, and also very good morning. With gracious blessings and mercy of Holy Trio, and on behalf of Fraternity of Vedanta Society of Portland, I welcome you all for joyous Devotees meeting commemorating the 125th year of Ramakrishna Movement. I am Devi Shananda, your MC today. Swamiji says, "Hey born heir to the infinite thou art, within thy heart is the ocean of love. Give, give away, whoever asks return. His ocean dwindles down to a mere drop. From highest Brahman to the blade of grass and to the very minutest atom, everywhere is the same God, the all love. Friend, offer mind, soul, body at their feet. These are his manifold forms before thee. Rejecting them, where seekest thou for God, who loves all beings without distinction? He indeed is worshipping best his God." This is from Complete Works of Swami Vivekananda, Volume 4, page 496. Christopher Isherwood states that Ramakrishna Movement is unique because its founder is unique. Now, who is the founder? Can anybody say?
Sri Ramakrishna.
Correct. So, Ramakrishna himself, Ramakrishna's gospel is our modern gospel. For this alone, the movement must be regarded as the most important of all existing religious movements, no matter how large or influence or venerable the others may be. Now, the formation of Ramakrishna movement has several stages, aspects, and successions, and many spiritual, wonderful personalities were recognized throughout its history. Now, Sri Ramakrishna demonstrated to us through them that divine perfection can be achieved, and he also taught us through them the renunciation of worldliness, the contemplation of God, and purification of the heart through the love of God. Now, our holy company can progress and blossoms when we see, read, hear, and repeat the lives of these great personalities directly sculptured by Sri Ramakrishna. They serve, they serve as pillars of this movement and guide us in eternity. Thus, we become fortunate and blessed. So, with this faith and prayers, we shall arise our spirits with invocation of Vedic recitation and offering our hymns to our Guru, Sri Ramakrishna. Now, Guru means who can remove darkness or ignorance or any sort of weaknesses. So, unless this is removed, our vision of God is still awaiting. So, I request Jyotima and her cohorts to offer their dedication um, to our Guru.
विद्याये नमः। प्रणो देवी सरस्वती वादेवीर्वादिनीवती दीनामवित्र्यवतु वाग्देव्यै नमः। शन्नो मित्रः शन्वरुणः शन्नो भवद्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः। नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वामेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि ब्रह्मावतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। शीर्षाव्याख्यास्यामः वर्णस्वरः मात्राबलम् सामसन्तानः इत्युक्तः शीर्षाध्यायः। सहनौ यशः सहनौ ब्रह्मवर्चसम् अथातः सगुंहिताय उपनिषदं व्याख्यास्यामः। पञ्चस्वधिकरणेषु अधिलोकमधिज्योतिषमधिविद्यमधिप्रजमध्यात्मम् तामहासगुंहिता इत्याचक्षते। अथाभिलोकम् पृथिवीपूर्वरूपम् द्यौरुत्तररूपम् आकाशः सन्धिः वायुः सन्धानम् इत्यभिलोकम्। अथाभिज्योतिषम् अग्निः पूर्वरूपम् आदित्य उत्तररूपम् आपः सन्धिः वैद्युतः सन्धानम् इत्यभिज्योतिषम्। अथाभिविद्यम् आचार्यः पूर्वरूपम् अन्तेवास्युत्तररूपम् विद्यासन्धिः प्रवचनगुं सन्धानम् इत्यभिविद्यम्। अथाभिप्रथम् माता पूर्वरूपम् पितोत्तररूपम् प्रजासन्धिः प्रजननगुं सन्धानम् इत्यभिविद्यम्। अथाध्यात्मम् अधराहनुः पूर्वरूपम् उत्तराहनुरुत्तररूपम् वाक्सन्धिः जिह्वासन्धानम् इत्यध्यात्मम्। इतीमावः सगुंहिताः य एवमेतामहासगुंहिता व्याख्याता वेद सन्धीयते प्रजया पशुभिः ब्रह्मवर्चसेनान्नाद्येन सुवर्गेण लोकेन यश्चन्दसा वृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृताः सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया स्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासम् शरीरम् मे विचक्षणम् जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्याम् भूरि विश्रुवम् ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया विहितः श्रुतम् मे गोपाय आवहन्ति विकन्धाना पूर्वाणा चीरमात्मनः वासागुंसि मम गावश्च अन्नपाने च सर्वदा ततो मे श्रियमावह लोमशाम् पशुभिः सह स्वाहा। ब्रह्मचारिणः स्वाहा विमायन्तु ब्रह्मचारिणः स्वाहा रमायन्तु ब्रह्मचारिणः स्वाहा रमायन्तु ब्रह्मचारिणः स्वाहा शमायन्तु ब्रह्मचारिणः स्वाहा यशोजने सानि स्वाहा श्रेयान् वस्य सोसानि स्वाहा तन्त्वा भगप्रविशानि स्वाहा समाभग प्रविश स्वाहा तस्मिन् सहस्रशाखे निबधाहं त्वयि हृदे स्वाहा यथा प्रवतायन्ति यथा मासा अहर्जरम् एवं मां ब्रह्मचारिणः स्रोऽभ्याहृतयः तासामुहस्मैकान्यस्य महैति तद्ब्रह्म अङ्गान्यन्यदेवताः भुवक्षम् सुवरित्यथो लोकः महैत्यादित्यः आदित्येन वाव सर्वे लोका महीयन्ते भूरिति वा अग्निः भुवरिति वायुः सुवरित्यादित्यः मह इति चन्द्रमाः चन्द्रमसा वाव सर्वाणि ज्योतिगुंसि महीयन्ते भूरिति वा वृषः भुव इति सामानि सुवरिति यजोगुंसि मह इति ब्रह्मा ब्रह्मणा वाव सर्वे वेदा महीयन्ते भूरिति वै प्राणः भुव इत्यपानः सुवरिति व्यानः मह इत्यन्नम् अन्नेन वाव सर्वे प्राणा महीयन्ते एताश्चतुस्रश्चतुर्धा चतुस्रश्चतुस्रोऽव्याहृतयः तायो वेद स वेद ब्रह्मा सर्वे तस्मै देवा बलिमा वहन्ति ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः आविर्देवयतो न पूर्णमाप्यायय हरिः वर्धमानः यदा स्तोतृभ्यो महितोऽत्रायुजासि भूयस्तभाजो हरते स्याम ब्रह्म प्रावादिष्मतन्नो वासीत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ तत्सत् श्रीरामकृष्णार्पणमस्तु अभिनंदन बंदन खंडन हे कारण कारण हे अभिनंदन बंदन खंडन हे शरणागत किंकर बीजमने शरणागत किंकर बीजमने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने कंदर तामस भास्कर हे तुमि विष्णु प्रजापति शंकर हे परब्रह्म परात्पर वेद बने परब्रह्म परात्पर वेद बने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने वारण शासन अंकुश में नरतार करे हरि चक्षुष में गुणगान परायण देव गणे गुणगान परायण देव गणे गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने कुंडलिनी कमल करे तुलिगंति विदारण कारक हे मम मानस चंचल रात्र दिने मम मानस चंचल रात्र दिने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने त्रिपुरान मंगल नायक हे सुख शांति भय नायक हे प्रयताप हरे तव नाम गुणे प्रयताप हरे तव नाम गुणे गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने अभिमान प्रभाव विमर्त करे गतिहीन जने तुमि रक्षक हे चित शंकित वंचित भक्ति धने चित शंकित वंचित भक्ति धने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने तव नाम सदा शुभ साधक हे प्रतिग्राम मानव पावक हे महिमा तव गोचर शुद्ध मने महिमा तव गोचर शुद्ध मने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने जय सद्गुरु ईश्वर पावक हे भव रोग विकार विनाशक हे मनये नरहे तव श्री चरणे मनये नरहे तव श्री चरणे गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने गुरुदेव दया रहे मन हे रहे तव श्री चरणे मन हे रहे तव श्री चरणे गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने 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 गुरुदेव दया कर दीन जने
Thank you, team, for self-elevating, chanting, and devotional offering to our Guru on our behalf. Now I request Revered Swami Chandrasekhar Anandaji to formally welcome all and enlighten us the purpose of this meeting. Maharaj.
ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। ॐ जननीं शारदां देवीं रामकृष्णं जगद्गुरुं पादपद्मे तयोः श्रित्वा प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः। ॐ नमः श्रीयतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चे सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे। Dear devotees and friends, let us first feel that we are children of immortality. As Swamiji wanted to address us like a Upanishadic Rishi, the seer, he invoked within us, Srinnantu Vishwe Amritasya Putra. We are not ordinary human being. We are immortal being. So first, let us remember that we are not ordinary people. We are immortal being, children of immortal being, children of Divine Mother. That is most important. Now today, why we are gathered here? We are celebrating anniversary of establishment of Ramakrishna Mission, 125th anniversary. As we know, Ramakrishna Movement was started by Sri Ramakrishna himself. We have seen the video and we have also heard the introductory remarks that when Sri Ramakrishna experienced the ultimate truth, traveling by various paths, he found that all faiths, all paths lead to the same goal. So when he realized this, a band of young men started coming, and not only that, some householders also started coming to him. And gradually, a movement started. And it was formally done when Sri Ramakrishna distributed ochre clothes and rosaries to few renunciates. So Ramakrishna movement has got three branches, we can say. One is Vedanta societies in the West, and in India we find Ramakrishna Mutt, not math, Ramakrishna Mutt, and Ramakrishna Mission. So first, when Swami Vivekananda traveled in India, he found people were suffering because of penury, because of ignorance, because of poverty, and also various kinds of superstitions. And then he started finding the cause of it. And he found, contrary to the popular opinion was the religion is the cause of such degradation. But he discovered that it is not religion, but not practicing religion properly. So he, after discovery, then he came to the West and he started preaching here. And here also he found, though there is prosperity, but inside it is hollow. And church going is only a ritual to meet people, to have contacts. So he started preaching the real religion, that means to convey to everyone that they are not ordinary sinners, ordinary people or are sinners. They are children of immortal bliss. And Swamiji said, my ideal indeed can be put in a few words, and that is to preach unto mankind their divinity, and how to make it manifest in every movement of life. So twofold: one, that we are divine. Not only that we are divine, it should be manifested in our movement, in everyday life. So he started Vedanta movement here. Ramakrishna Mutt was started when Sri Ramakrishna distributed ochre clothes and rosaries to his renunciates. That means it was the organization for monastics. But what about lay devotees? After completing the Western mission, Swami Vivekananda returned to India. And when he was here, once he was strolling in one house, and a lady was there and pacing up and down. And Swamiji said that, I'm in love with. And the lady eagerly asked, who is that pretty girl or fortunate girl? Swami said, not girl. It is the organization that's more important. Because he was searching how to convey these ideas to every doorsteps. As Swamiji said it, the ideas, to implement this lofty ideal, he wanted to set in motion a machinery which would bring the noblest ideas and ideals to the doorsteps of even the poorest and the meanest. So how to do that? It's not easy to convey ideas that also in an effective way. Therefore, when he returned to India, he started Ramakrishna Mission. It is twofold. That means one is secular, one is sacred. So first thing is, when a man is hungry, then no teachings can enter to him. Khali pete dharma hai na. Empty belly is no good for religion. Therefore, first, the physical need is to be satisfied. And that is why he started relief works. When Calcutta was infested by plague, Swamiji started plague relief there. And even he wanted to sell off Belur Math, which was so dear to him. But it is due to the intervention of Holy Mother that he resisted himself to sell that property, Belur Math. So anyway, it has fourfold of work. So one is relief, rehabilitation. First, those who are hungry, they should be fed well, annadan. The second is those who are ailing, they should be given medicine and also support, nourishment. But these are temporary measures. For any permanent solution cannot be achieved by only supplying food, etc. Therefore, the third aspect is the education. He started that. And the fourth is the education that will uplift oneself, religious education, spiritual education. So he concluded Ramakrishna Mission will be guided by twin ideal, Atmano Mokshartham Jagat Hitaya Cha, for one's realization or realization of self, liberation of self, and second, it is for good of the humanity. But the good of the humanity is only a byproduct. For a monk, the first thing is that he is striving for his own spiritual realization. And this is the method. What's the method? To serve people. So serving will also be accomplished along with the self-realization, the goal. So this twin ideal he put when he started Ramakrishna Mission. And it is primarily for the services of people and also to get the householders involved in it. And their services would also uplift them, and also it will do good to the humanity. So this is the idea. Therefore, he gave importance to not only the monastic disciples, but also the householders. So we thought, since we are celebrating 125th years of establishment of Ramakrishna Mission, why not we dwell on the divine characters of householder devotees? Many times we read about the monastic disciples. So we thought it is a fitting occasion to read and learn and also inculcate their wonderful characters in our lives by reminding ourselves. Therefore, we thought that it is a fitting occasion that we read the lives of such wonderful devotees so that we also imbibe those characters. So, what are those? The character is mainly we can see twofold. One is service, one is sacrifice, and second is service. People are a bit afraid of sacrifice, but we do all the time. We are sacrificing our small egos all the time. In a family, father or mother sacrifices for their children. In a society, to gain greater good, we sacrifice. But we don't realize it. So Swamiji wanted to give this dimension in uplifting our spiritual life. So sacrifice is important. Tyagenaikam Amritatva Manasu. And we'll find all the characters were such that they dedicated themselves for the upliftment of the society and others. And the second point is, so first is sacrifice and then service. Through service, we are connected with divine. Otherwise, we are separate. When you come here, even if you lift a blade of grass and put somewhere else, that's service. You connect yourself with this place. So Swamiji put in front of us these twin ideals, sacrifice and service. That we'll find in the characters of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, the lay disciples. So this is a fitting occasion, and in short, this is Ramakrishna Movement and Ramakrishna Mutt for monastic disciples to live in one place and cultivate spiritual life. The second is Ramakrishna Mission. It's a machinery, as Swamiji said, that I want to set in motion a machinery which would bring the noblest ideas and ideals to the doorstep of even the poorest and the meanest. So this is our machinery and established by Swami Vivekananda. And to our great amazement, we find when he started on 1st May 97, within 15 days, relief work started in Mehula by Swami Akhandanandaji Maharaj. When he was in Rajputana, when Swamiji was in the West, he started relief work there also. And Swamiji praised his services. But after the establishment of Ramakrishna Mission, he did within 15 days. He did relief work within 15 days. And he was traveling by the side of Ganges, and he saw a Muslim girl broke her pitcher. And she was weeping, what will happen? Mother will beat me. And then Swami Akhandanandaji, with his meager resources, bought some purse rice and also bought a pitcher. And when he was distributing, other children also came, because that time it was famine. So he started that work, and Swamiji praised that work, and he said, brother, please go ahead. We'll supply all resources. So it is sacrifice and service that is in front of us. And we are divine being. We are not ordinary people. That we are to remind ourselves all the time. So this is, we hear many stories, many lives from various readers. So let us welcome you all, and thank you very much for this to meet on this occasion, though we have not met for long because of COVID situation. Now gradually we are to open up as the Divine Mother wills. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Swamiji, for this enlightening us with your motivational speech. Now, Ramakrishna's gospel is the gospel of the modern age, says Christopher Iserwood. So we find answers to all our problems in this magic book. So I request Susie to offer us excerpts from the gospel. Susie.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be reading for just a few minutes, but before I start, I wanted to give us a few reminders about what a magic book this really is. So the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is the English translation of the Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita, the conversations of Sri Ramakrishna with his disciples, devotees, and visitors, recorded by Mahendranath Gupta, who wrote the book under the pseudonym of M. M, one of the most intimate disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, was present during all the conversations that are recorded in the main body of the book and noted them in his diary. They therefore have the value of almost stenographic records. This particular copy is from our bookstore, and you can also find it in our library. And I'm going to read to you most of the incident from May 27th, 1883. And it kind of reads as a play script as you're reading this. So Sri Ramakrishna was in his room at Dakshineshwar, conversing with the devotees. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. If people feel, this is the master Sri Ramakrishna speaking, if people feel sincere longing, they will find that all paths lead to God. But one should have single-minded devotion. It is also described as chaste and unswerving devotion to God. It is like a tree with only one trunk shooting straight up. Promiscuous devotion is like a tree with 5 branches. Such was the single-minded devotion of the gopis to Krishna, that they didn't care to look at anyone but the Krishna that they had seen at Vrindavan, the shepherd Krishna, bedecked with a garland of yellow wildflowers and wearing a peacock feather in his crest. At the sight of Krishna at the Mathura, with a turban on his head and dressed in royal robes, the gopis pulled down their veils. They would not look at his face. Who is this man, they said. Should we violate our chaste love for Krishna by talking to him? The devotion of the wife to her husband is also an instance of unswerving love. She feeds her brothers-in-law as well and looks after their comforts, but she has a special relationship with her husband. Likewise, one may have that single-minded devotion to one's own religion, but one should not have, on that account, hate toward any other faiths. On the contrary, one should have a friendly attitude toward them. The master bathed in the Ganges and then went to the Kali temple with M. He sat before the image and offered flowers at the feet of the Divine Mother. Now and then, he put flowers on his own head and meditated. After a long time, he stood up. He was in a spiritual mood and danced before the image, chanting the name Kali. Now and again, he said, "O Mother, O destroyer of suffering, O remover of grief and agony." Was he teaching people thus to pray to the Mother of the universe with a yearning heart in order to get rid of the suffering inevitable in physical life? Sri Ramakrishna returned to his room and sat on the west porch. Rakal, M, Nukur Vaishnav, and other devotees were with him. Nukur had been known to the master for about 25 years. He was a devotee of Gauranga and had a small shop which Sri Ramakrishna had often visited when he first came to Calcutta from Kamarpur. Still overpowered in divine ecstasy, the master sang, "O Kali, my mother full of bliss, enchantress of the almighty Shiva, in thy delirious joy thou dancest, clapping thy hands together. Eternal one, thou great first cause, clothed in the form of the void, thou wearest the moon upon thy brow. Where didst thou find thy garland of heads before the universe was made? Thou art the mover of all that move, and we are but thy helpless toys. We move alone as thou movest us, and speak as through us thou speakest." But worthless Kamal Kanta says, fondly berating thee, "Confoundress, with thy flashing sword, thoughtlessly thou hast put to death my virtue and my sin alike." He sang again, "Mother, thou art our sole redeemer. Thou the support of the 3 gunas, higher than the Most High. Thou art compassionate, I know, who takest away our bitter grief. Sandhya art thou, and Gayatri. Thou dost sustain this universe, mother, the help of those that have no help but thee, O eternal beloved of Shiva. Thou art in earth, in water thou liest at the root of all. In me, in every creature, thou hast thy home, though clothed with form, yet thou art formless reality. The master sang a few more songs in praise of the Divine Mother, and then he said to the devotees, "It is not always best to tell householders about the sorrows of life. They want bliss. Those who suffer from chronic poverty can go without food for a day or two, but it is not wise to talk about the sorrows and miseries of life to those who suffer if their food is delayed a few minutes." Vaishnav Charan used to say, "Why should one constantly dwell on sin? Be merry." While the master was resting after his midday meal, Manohar Goswami, a singer of kirtan, arrived. He sang about the ecstatic love of Gauranga and the divine episode of Vrindavan. The master was absorbed in deep spiritual mood, and he tore off his shirt and said to the melody of the kirtan, assuming the attitude of Radha, "O Krishna, my beloved, O friends, bring Krishna to me. Then you will be real friends, or take me to him, and I will be your slave forever." The musician sat spellbound at Sri Ramakrishna's ecstasy, and then said with folding of hands, "Won't you please rid me of my worldliness?" The master said, "You are like the holy man who went about the city after first finding a lodging. You are a sweet person and express many sweet ideas." Musician, "Sir, I am like a bullock that only carries the bag of sugar but cannot taste it. Alas, I myself do not enjoy the sweetness of divine bliss." The melodious music went on, and all were filled with joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie, for reading Ramakrishna's counsel for us. Sri Ramakrishna's universal message was delivered by Swamiji through his man-making and inspiring lectures both in West and East. So I request Ashwin to read from the complete works of Swamiji to inspire us. Ashwin?
Namaste to everyone. I'm reading from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, third volume, and chapter 4. Here are some of the forms in which love manifests itself. First, there is reverence. Why do people show reverence to temples and holy places? Because he is worshipped there, and his presence is associated with all such places. Why do people in every country pay reverence to teachers of religion? It is natural for the human heart to do so, because all such teachers preach the Lord. At bottom, reverence is a growth out of love. We we can we can none of us revere him whom we do not love. Then comes Preeti, pleasure in God. What an immense pleasure men take in the objects of the senses. They go anywhere, run through any danger to get the thing which they love, the thing which their senses like. What is wanted of the bhakta is this very kind of intense love, which has, however, to be directed to God. Then there is the sweetest of pains, viraha, the intense misery due to the absence of the beloved. When a man feels intense misery because he has not attained to God, has not known that which is the only thing worthy to be known, and becomes in consequence very dissatisfied and almost mad, then there is viraha. And this state of the mind makes him feel disturbed in the presence of anything other than the beloved. In earthly love, we see how often this viraha comes. Again, when men are really and intensely in love with women, or women with men, they feel a kind of natural annoyance in the presence of all those whom they do not love. Exactly the same state of impatience in regard to the things that are not loved comes to the mind when parabhakti holds sway over it. Even to talk about things other than God becomes distasteful then. Think of Him alone, and give up all other vain words. Those who talk of him alone, the bhakta finds to be friendly to him, while those who talk of anything else appear to him to be unfriendly. A still higher stage of love is reached when life itself is manifested for the sake of the one ideal of love. When life itself is considered beautiful and worthy living only on account of love. Without it, such a life would not remain even for a moment. Life is sweet because of it thinks of the beloved. Hisness comes when a man becomes perfect according to bhakti, when he has become blessed, when he has attained God, when he has touched the feet of God, as it were, then his whole nature is purified and completely changed. All his purpose in life then becomes fulfilled. Yet many such bhaktas live on just to worship him. This is the bliss, the only pleasure in life which they will not give up. O King, such is the blessed quality of Hari that even those who have become satisfied with everything, all the knots of whose hearts have been cut asunder, even they love the Lord for the love's sake. The Lord, whom all the gods worship, all the lovers of liberation, and all the knowers of the Brahman. Such is the power of love. When a man has forgotten himself altogether and does not feel that anything belongs to him, then he acquires the state of tadiyata. Everything is sacred to him because it belongs to the beloved. Even in regard to earthly love, the lover thinks that everything belongs to his beloved, is sacred and so dear to him. He loves even a piece of cloth belonging to the darling of his heart. In the same way, when a person loves the Lord, the whole universe becomes dear to him because it is all his. How can we love Vyasti, the particular, without first loving the Samisti, the universe? God is the Samisti, the generalized and the abstract universal whole, and the universe that we see in the Vyasti, the particularized thing. To love the whole universe is possible only by way of loving the Samisti, the universal which is, as it were, the unity in which are to be found millions and millions of smaller unities. The philosophers of India do not stop at the particulars. They cast a hurried glance at the particulars and immediately start to find the generalized forms which will include all the particulars. The search after the universal is the one search of Indian philosophy and religion. The Gnani aims to the wholeness of things, at that one absolute and generalized being, knowing which he knows everything. The Bhakta wishes to realize that one generalized abstract person in loving the in loving whom he loves the whole universe. The yogi wishes to have possession of that one generalized form of power by controlling which he controls the whole universe. The Indian mind, throughout its history, has been directed to this kind of singular search after the universal in everything in science, in psychology, in love, in philosophy. So, the conclusion to which the Bhakta comes is that if you go on merely loving one person after another, you may go on loving them so for an infinite length of time without being in the least able to love the world as a whole. When at last the central idea is, however, arrived at that the sum total of all love is God, that the sum total of the aspirations of all the souls in the universe, whether they be free or bound or struggling towards liberation, is God. Then alone it becomes possible for anyone to put forth universal love.
Thank you, Ashwin. Now we shall listen to the life stories in brief of some of the chief householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. They all lived with God. They all are like pearls strung in a thread called Sri Ramakrishna. So, in Ramakrishna's life, his elder brother, late Ram Kumar, was replaced by his chief disciple named Balaram Basu. I request Uwe um, to share the life story of Balaram Basu and Sri Ramakrishna's influence on him. Over to Uwe.
Namaste, everyone. Balaram was born in December 1842 in a wealthy Vaishnava family of North Kolkata. His grandfather, Guru Prasad Basu, had established a Raja Shyam temple in his home, and because of this, that section of the city came to be known as Shyam Bazar. He also built the Shyam Sundar temple on the bank of the Jamuna in Vrindavan at a cost of 100,000 rupees. Balaram imbibed from his father a devotional nature and indifference towards the world. He spent several hours every morning in japa in meditation. He suffered very much from digestive troubles, and for 12 years he had to live on milk and gruel. In order to regain his health, he lived most of his period in Puri, the holy place of Jagannath on the coast of the Bay of Bengal. There he became acquainted with many Vaishnava monks, and this stirred his interest in spiritual life even more. While he was still living in Puri, Balaram had read about the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna in the Sulabh Samachar, a journal edited by Keshav Chandra Sen. He had also received a letter from one of his family priests, Ram Dayal, giving a detailed account of Sri Ramakrishna's holy life. Ram Dayal had met the master personally and wrote Balaram to come immediately to see him. The day after he arrived in Kolkata, Balaram went with Ram Dayal to Dakshineswar. It was probably January 1st, 1881. They reached there late in the afternoon and found Sri Ramakrishna's room crowded with Brahmo devotees, including Keshav. Balaram did not get a chance to introduce himself, but sat down in the corner and listened to the master. Sri Ramakrishna was saying, God cannot be seen without yearning of heart, and this yearning is impossible unless one has finished the experiences of life. Those who live surrounded by women and gold and have not yet come to the end of their experiences do not yearn for God. As soon as the Brahmos left the room to have some refreshments, Sri Ramakrishna turned to Balaram and said, Is there anything you want to ask me? Yes, sir. Does God really exist? Certainly he does. Can a person see him? Yes, he reveals himself to the devotee who thinks of him as his nearest and dearest. Because you do not get any response by praying to him once, you must not conclude that he does not exist. But why can't I see him when I pray to him so much? Sri Ramakrishna then smiled and asked, Do you really consider him to be as dear to your heart as your own children? No, sir, Balaram admitted. I never felt that strongly for him. The master then said in a sweet, convincing voice, Pray to God, thinking of him as dearer than your own self. Truly, I tell you, he is extremely fond of his devotees. He cannot but reveal himself to them. He comes to a person even before he is sought. If a person comes one step towards God, God comes 10 steps towards that person. There is none more intimate and more affectionate than God. It seemed to Balaram that the master was his very own relative. He had never in his life met such a remarkable person. He noticed that there were similarities between the lives of Sri Chaitanya and Sri Ramakrishna, and he pondered, such a sweet nature and repeated bhava samadhi, meaning divine ecstasy, are not found in ordinary human beings. Can it be that Sri Chaitanya has incarnated himself again? Sri Ramakrishna was always welcome at Balaram's home. The master visited his home 100 times, and Balaram kept a record of all those visits. Whenever necessary, the master would stay overnight at Balaram's and there partake of the prasad of Jagannath, their family deity, who was worshipped every day in their home. The master sometimes jokingly referred to the temple of Dakshineswar as Mother Kali's fort. Balaram's home was thus the Calcutta fort, or as he sometimes called it, his parlor. M. wrote in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Balaram's house in Calcutta had been sanctified many times by the master's presence. There he frequently lost himself in samadhi, dancing, singing, or talking about God. Those of the master's disciples and devotees who could not go to Dakshineswar visited him there and received his instructions. He often asked Balaram to invite young disciples such as Rakal, Bhavanath, and Narendra to his house, saying, these pure souls are the veritable manifestations of God. To feed them is to feed God himself. They are born with special divine attributes. By serving them, you will be serving God. And so it happened that whenever the master was at Balaram's house, the devotees would gather there. It was the master's chief vineyard in Calcutta. It was here that the devotees came to know each other intimately. At Balaram's repeated request, his father, Radha Mohan, came to Calcutta from Vrindavan to meet the master. Sri Ramakrishna knew that Radha Mohan was a steadfast member of the Vaishnava sect, but he wanted to broaden his religious outlook. Thus the master said to him, he is indeed a real man who has harmonized everything. Most people are one-sided, but I point to the one. All views, Shakta, Vaishnava, the Vedanta, have that one for their center. He who is formless is, again, endowed with form. It is he who forms. On another occasion, the master said to Balaram's father, the whole thing is to love God and taste his sweetness. He is sweetness, and the devotee is its enjoyer. The devotee drinks the sweet bliss of God. Further, God is the lotus, and the devotee the bee. The devotee sips the honey of the lotus. As a devotee cannot live without God, so also God cannot live without his devotee. Then the devotee becomes the sweetness, and God is enjoyer. The devotee becomes the lotus, and God is the bee. It is the Godhead that has become these two in order to enjoy his own bliss. That is the significance of the episode of Radha and Krishna. All of his life, Vaishnavas was a believer in ahimsa, non-injury. He had even thought it was wrong to kill the mosquitoes which disturbed his meditation. But after associating with Sri Ramakrishna for a couple of years, he realized that the most important thing in spiritual life is to keep the mind in God. And therefore, killing a few mosquitoes for the sake of steady meditation should not be considered a sin. Although Balaram belonged to a rich aristocratic family, one would never known it from his demeanor. He was the embodiment of Vaishnava attitude. Be humbler than a blade of grass, and be patient and forbearing like a tree. Take no honor to thyself, give honor to all. Chant unceasingly the name of the Lord. M gave a couple of descriptions of Balaram's self-effacing nature in the Gospel. On March 11, 1882, he wrote, about 8 o'clock in the morning, Sri Ramakrishna went as planned to Balaram Bashu's house in Calcutta. It was the day of the Dola Yatra, a spring festival associated with Krishna. The devotees and the master sang and danced in a state of divine fervor. Several of them were in an ecstatic mood. When the music was over, the devotees sat down for their meal. Balaram stood there humbly, like a servant, nobody would have taken him for the master of the house. Swami Abhutananda mentioned the following incidents in his memoirs about Balaram. Balaram Babu would save money from his household budget and use it to serve the monks. His relatives thought he was a miser. I never knew how rich he was. One day, seeing him lying on a narrow bed, I said, "Why don't you find yourself a larger bed? This one is too narrow for you." Do you know what he said? "This earthly body will one day return to the earth. Why should money be spent for my bed when it can be much better spent in service to the holy people?" The wedding banquet for Balaram Babu's younger daughter, Krishna Mai, was held on a grand scale. It had been arranged by Balaram's brothers. Balaram Babu had not been in favor of spending so much money, however. He used to say, "A feast for relatives is equal to a feast for ghosts." At last, he got some satisfaction when Swami Yogananda, by coincidence, visited his home that day. Balaram Babu said to him, "I know that monks do not participate in marriage festivals, but if you eat at least a sweet, I shall consider this huge spending worthwhile." Swami Yogananda ate a little on his request. Swami Vivekananda had tremendous love and regard for Balaram. Swamiji once said to him, "Our relationship with you is different. If you push us out of the front door, we shall enter again through the back door." Balaram always stood beside the disciples of the Master and served them wholeheartedly. One day, however, Balaram lamented to Swamiji, "You and I both went to the Master, but now you have renounced your home and become a monk. You are practicing japam and meditation and making tremendous progress in a short time, whereas I remain the same bound soul. I have achieved nothing." "Look, Balaram," answered Swamiji, 3 generations of your family have given service to holy people. Do you think such a thing could be fruitless? As a result of such virtuous actions, you have had a chance to serve a great soul like Sri Ramakrishna. This will glorify your dynasty. You don't need to practice renunciation or hard austerities. It is the result of your virtuous deeds that you met and served the Master. And you know how much the Master liked to visit your home and was fond of your offerings. What will you do with heaven or liberation? Is it the Master's love not enough?" Balaram was happy to hear that. He realized that his service to the Master was equal to meditation and austerity. In 1890, there was an epidemic of influenza in Calcutta, which took the lives of many people. Balaram also became a victim of that epidemic and died on April 13th, 1890.
So let us remember that yearning of God with devotional concentration is very important. So I request participants to confine their offerings within 10 minutes. So we are running out of time. So one of the chief aspect of bhakti is seeing God as one's own child. So this approach of a devotee towards God is admired by God dearly. So I request Kathy Mother, to enlighten this aspect through the life story of Gopal's Ma. So we call her as Mother of Sri Krishna.
Namaste. So, as Swami said, I'll be talking about Gopal Ma. She lived from 1522 to 1906. So I just have excerpts from They Lived with God rather than just reading. So you'll see me thumbing through. It's hard to understand how the infinite God always assumes a finite human form and plays with human beings. But this play was in fact enacted in the life of a woman devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. She was known as Gopal Ma. Gopal Mal's given name was Agoramani Devi, and she came to be called Gopal Mal because of her fervent devotion to her infant Krishna, which culminated in Lord Krishna appearing before her as a child and seemingly solid physical form. Mani attained this high spiritual experience by living a life of austerity and renunciation. One way to approach God, according to traditional Hinduism, is by practicing any of the 5 dualistic attitudes or moods. These attitudes or moods are manifested in the relationship between the devotee and God. And they are Shanta Bhava, the peace and stillness felt in the presence of God; Dasya Bhava, the attitude of a servant towards the master; Satya Bhava, the attitude of a friend towards a friend; Vatsala Bhava, the attitude of a parent towards a child; and Madhura Bhava, the attitude of a lover towards the beloved. The idea before this classification is to help aspirants intensify their relationship with God. And Gopal Mal, as Swami said, practiced Vatsala Bhava because she experienced her God through Krishna as a child. Agoramani was born in the Brahmin family about the year of 1822 in a northern suburb of Calcutta. Following the custom of that time, she was married at the age of 9. Her wedding was the first and last she saw her husband, as he died before the marriage was consummated, leaving her as a widow at age 14. However, she was initiated into spiritual life by her husband's family guru and the child Krishna as her chosen deity. She was given Gopala mantra. Since a Hindu Brahmin widow does not remarry, the love and energy that Orgamani would have given her husband and child was diverted to her beloved Gopala. By the 8th Sri Ramakrishna's name has begun to spread. It was in the fall of 1884 that Gopal Mal first went to Dakshineshwar along with another woman to seek an audience with the holy man. As the towns were both on the Ganges, they went 3 miles by boat. Sri Ramakrishna received them cordially, gave them advice on devotion, sang a few songs, and asked them to come back again. She did. After her first visit, Gopal Mal felt an irresistible attraction for Sri Ramakrishna, and she noticed a change in her life. Off and on, she would think about Ramakrishna and say, "Man, and a real devotee." She decided to see him again. A few days later, while she was practicing japa, her desire to see him became so intense that she immediately left for Dakshineshwar by herself. It's an ancient custom that one not visit God or a holy person empty-handed. So on her way, she brought 2 pennies worth of stale sweets, which is all she could afford. She was confident that the sweets that Ramakrishna would not eat them, since many people brought many other delicious foods. But no sooner had she arrived at Dakshineshwar than Ramakrishna said, "Oh, you've come. Give me what you have." So she reluctantly handed over the stale sweets to him. Like a hungry boy, he began eating them with great relish and said, "Why do you spend money for sweets? Prepare some sweet coconut balls, and when you visit the place, bring 1 or 2 of them with you, or bring a little ordinary dish. I want to eat your own cooking." A few days later, she came to Dakshineshwar on foot, carrying some ordinary curry that she had cooked for Sri Ramakrishna. He relished it and said, "What a delicacy. This is like nectar." Tears rolled down Gopal Mal's cheeks, and she was humbled that he said that because she was so poor. For 3 months, Gopal Mal visited Ramakrishna, always carrying some plain, ordinary food for him. Invariably, he asked to bring new food on her next visit, sometimes as she would think and discuss, "Oh, Gopala, what's the outcome of my prayer? You have brought me to a holy man who always asks that I should come back for food." And as soon as she returned to Kamarhati, she would again feel that irresistible attraction, and her mind would love to see the master. It was the spring of 1885. One morning at 3 a.m., Gopal Mal was practicing her japa as she usually did. After finishing the japa, she was about to offer the result of the japa to her chosen deity when she noticed that Sri Ramakrishna was seated at her left with his right hand clenched. Startled, she wondered, "What is this? How did he get here at such an odd hour?" And she later described it as this: "I looked at him in amazement and thought, how did he come here?" Meanwhile, Gopala, as she called Sri Ramakrishna, kept on smiling sweetly. As I took courage and grasped his left hand, he had disappeared. And in place of him, the real Gopala, a big child 10 months old, appeared. He crawled towards me and raising one hand, he said, "Mother, give me butter." The overwhelming experience bewildered me. I cried out so loudly that men would be astonished. With tearful eyes, I said, "My son, I'm poor. How should I feed you? Where shall I get butter and cream?" But Gopala did not listen to me. Give me something to eat," he demanded. What should I do? What should I do? Sobbing, I got up and brought some dried coconut balls from the hanging basket. Placing them in his hand, I said, "Gopala, my darling, I offer you this wretched thing, but don't give me such a poor thing in return." I could not perform japa at all that day. Gopala sat on my lap, snatched away my rosary, jumped on my shoulders, and moved around the room. At daybreak, I rushed to Dakshineshwar like a crazy woman. Gopala also accompanied me, resting his head on my very shoulder. Sweet, isn't it? Modern men and women inclined to be skeptical and scientific have great difficulty in accepting a real experience as Gopal Mal's. They did not believe her. However, from the traditional Hindu point of view, there are much finer states of consciousness than the one in which we experience the sense world. This has been substantiated over and over again by the experiences of saints and seers. A few days later, Gopal Mal went to Dakshineshwar to visit the master. After greeting him, she went to the Nahabat, or concert tower, where the Holy Mother lived. It was Gopal Mal's habit to practice japa whenever she had the opportunity. While she was doing japa one day at the Nahabat, Sri Ramakrishna came and said, "Why do you practice such japa now? You have had way too many visions." I'm paraphrasing. Gopal Mal replied, "Shall I not practice japa anymore? Have I attained everything?" "Yes, you've attained everything." "Everything?" "Yes, everything." "What do you say? Have I accomplished everything?" "Yes, you have. It's no longer necessary for you to practice japa and austerity for yourself. But if you wish, you may continue." Those disciples, pointing to himself, for the welfare of this body. Thus assured Sri Ramakrishna 3 times, she said, "All right, whatever I do henceforth will be for you."
Thank you, Katima, for this devotional offering. Now, he was an eyewitness, well-wisher, and financial fulfiller in the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna. I request Lokesh to speak on Madhuranath Bishwas.
Namaste everyone. So, as Swamiji said, Madhuranath Vishwas was one of the chief provider for, was selected, I would say, was selected as one of the chief provider for Sri Ramakrishna. So you have to listen to his, if you want to listen to his, how fortunate he was, we have to listen in Sri Ramakrishna's voice itself. So once Ramakrishna said, it was written in Mathur's horoscope that his Ishta, means chosen deity, would always be gracious to him, nay, would even accompany him wherever he went and protect him, assuming a human form. Thus, Sri Ramakrishna described Madhuranath Vishwas' wonderful good fortune to the devotee who come to him along after. He told this to the devotees who came long after Madhuranath has passed away. So this is how fortunate he was. So then on one day, Sri Ramakrishna was pacing back and forth on the northeastern veranda of his room in Dakshineshwar. He was in a spiritual mood, completely oblivious to his surroundings. Mathur was then seated alone in a room of his kuti. Like the room was opposite to his veranda of Ramakrishna was there. He was watching what Ramakrishna is doing. So from there he saw that so all of a sudden Mathur came running towards Sri Ramakrishna and threw himself at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna and began to cry profusely. So then Ramakrishna said, "What happened? Why you are crying? You are an aristocrat." He was an aristocrat. He was like a kind of a king at that time. So he said, "You are an aristocrat and Rani Rasamani's son-in-law. What will people say if you see you acting like this? Calm yourself. Please get up." Then Mathur gradually got control of himself and said, "Father," this is how he used to address Sri Ramakrishna. "Father," called Sri Ramakrishna, "I watched you just now as you walked back and forth in the veranda. I saw it distinctly. As you walked towards me, you are no longer yourself. You are the Divine Mother, Kali, from the temple. Then when you turned around and you walked in the opposite direction, you are Lord Shiva. At first, I thought this was a kind of optical illusion. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, but I saw the same thing. As often as I looked, I saw it." Sri Ramakrishna then said, "But I know nothing." Then he somehow, like Mathur again became overwhelmed and started crying again. This made Sri Ramakrishna very nervous. Okay. So he thought that if Rasamani heard about this, she might misunderstand and think that he had put some spell on Mathur. And so he somehow convinced Mathur to calm down. So basically, now let's look at what is the background of Mathur like. So Mathur, it's very little is known about Mathur's early life. He was born in 1817. His parental home was in Kulna district of East Bengal. He studied at Hindu college with Devendranath Tagore, father of great poet Rabindranath Tagore. Both Rani Rasamani and her husband Rajchandra recognized Mathur's capabilities from observing his intelligence and tactfulness. Hence, they asked him to marry their third daughter, Karunamayi. She died in 1833, however, leaving Mathur with a son. In order to keep Mathur in the family, Rani Rasamani then married her fourth daughter, Jagadamba, to him. After Ramachandra's death in 1836, Mathur became a steward of Rani Rasamani's estate. So he was like kind of guardian of the estate of Rani Rasamani. So we all know how Rani Rasamani built the temple. So now we will look into that and what role Mathur played in that. The Dakshineshwar temple garden was built by Rani Rasamani and was dedicated on 31st May 1855. Sri Ramakrishna's elder brother Ramachandra officiated as priest of the Kali temple. Although Sri Ramakrishna was present at the dedication and was greatly attracted to the beautiful temple garden on the banks of the Ganges, he did not decide to live there permanently with his brother until several days had passed. Mathur, who was immediately impressed when he met Sri Ramakrishna and observed his gentle, pure and simple nature, Sri Ramakrishna was just 19 years old at that time. Mathur asked Ramkumar to engage in some temple work. to engage him in some temple work, such as decorating image of Kali. But Ramkumar told him that his younger brother was unwilling to accept any job. About the same time, Hruday, the nephew of Sri Ramakrishna, come to Dakshineshwar looking for employment. So one day, Sri Ramakrishna made an image of Shiva out of the clay from the river bank and worshipped it. Mathur happened to notice this image while walking by and asked Hruday to give this image to him after the worship is over. Mathur then took the image to Rani Rasamani. Both were amazed by Sri Ramakrishna's talent and obvious devotion. Shortly after that, Mathur approached Sri Ramakrishna, persuaded him to help his elder brother dress the image of Divine Mother. Sri Ramakrishna agreed, but on one condition, that Hruday would be responsible for looking after mother's jewelry. So that's how Ramakrishna started at the temple. So 3 months after this dedication ceremony, the image of Krishna in the Vishnu temple was broken and the priest of the temple was dismissed. Sri Ramakrishna was then appointed to his place, but within 1 year, he was asked to take over his brother's position as the priest of Divine Mother Kali, and his spiritual adventures began. So Mathur played a very important role in Sri Ramakrishna's life for next 14 years. Sri Ramakrishna later said, so he says like to the devotees later, so in that state of divine exaltation, I could no longer perform the formal worship. So he praised Mother. Mother, I said, who will look after me? I have not the power to take care of myself. I want to listen only to the talk of thee. I want to feed thy devotees. I want to give a little help to those whom I chance to meet. How will all that be possible, Mother? Give me a rich man to stand by me. This is why Mathur did so much to serve me. This is what Sri Ramakrishna said. So, but when he was during the same period when he was a priest, the officials of the temple were noticing a strange behavior of Sri Ramakrishna. So they complained to Mathur. So when officials complained to Mathur, he asked not to interfere with Sri Ramakrishna's actions in any way. He wanted to observe the situation himself. So one day he paid an unannounced visit to Dakshineshwar and secretly watched Sri Ramakrishna in the temple. From what he saw, he was convinced that Sri Ramakrishna was not insane, but his form of worship was result of heartfelt, profound love for Divine Mother. Mathur himself actually felt the temple was filled with intense manifestation of divinity. Immediately he told Rani Rasamani that they had an extraordinary worshipper, and he sent a message to the temple officials telling them to let Ramakrishna perform the worship in whatever way he liked. That's the way he supported Sri Ramakrishna. But still he had concerns about Sri Ramakrishna's safety. So he was always concerned about Sri Ramakrishna's safety, because the people in the temple may harm him or may do something. So his love and adoration for Master grew day by day. So as also did his anxiety for him. One day Sri Ramakrishna entered one of the Shiva temples, began to recite the Shiva Mahima Stotram, a hymn in the praise of Shiva, which included the following, which is the hymn. So as Sri Ramakrishna recited this verse, he became overwhelmed with emotion. Tears poured down his cheeks, and he cried aloud, "O Lord, how can I express thy infinity?" The temple servants and the officials quickly gathered around him, joking and saying things such as, "He is even crazier than usual today. And he is going to ride Shiva's shoulders. There is still time to pull him out of the temple." Meanwhile, Mathur had come. One of the officials seriously suggested that Sri Ramakrishna be forcefully removed from the shrine, and since he was very close to the deity, touch him if you don't value your head. This was the reply from Mathur. After a short time, Sri Ramakrishna regained consciousness of the outer world. Seeing Mathur and others are surrounding him, he became very fearful. Like a fearful child, he said, "Did I do anything wrong?" Then Mathur said, "Oh, Father, nothing. You are just reciting a hymn." That was the Mathur's reply. Mathur, this doesn't mean that Mathur didn't doubt Sri Ramakrishna. Mathur did doubt Sri Ramakrishna's sanity when he slapped Rani for thinking about the lawsuit when she was sitting in the mother's shrine. Mathur was not sure whether Sri Ramakrishna's usual behavior was caused by mental arbitration or by divine intoxication. So, with the consent of Rani, he engaged a well-known physician, Ganga Prasad Sen, to give master a thorough examination and prescribe medicine. Mathur also arranged a special diet and cold drinks for him, hoping to restore his system to normal condition. But Mathur and Rani Rasamani did not stop there. One day, they brought a prostitute to his room in order to test me. This is what Ramakrishna is saying. One day, to test me and also cure my madness. Sri Ramakrishna later told to his devotees, she was beautiful to look at with pretty eyes. I cried, oh mother, and rushed out of the room. I ran to Haldari and said to him, brother, come and see who has entered my room. I told Haldari and everyone else about this woman. So Mathur did test Sri Ramakrishna. He didn't accept him just like that. So he not only he has tested him multiple times. So next another incident is like Mathur doubt still remained. With the idea of testing him further, he one day said to the master, even God has to obey his own laws. Once a law is set up by God, not even he can overrule it. Sri Ramakrishna replied, what do you mean? He who makes the laws can unmake it if he desires so. He can also replace it with another law. But Mathur refused to accept this opinion. Says, if God who made the law that the red flowering tree will produce a red flowers, never white flowers. Let me see if we can produce a white flower on a red flowering tree. Sri Ramakrishna answered confidently, yes, he can do that. He can do everything, even that. Then next day, on the way to Pine Grove, Sri Ramakrishna saw two flowers, one red and one dazzling white, on the same branch of the red hibiscus tree. He immediately broke the branch and took it to Mathur. Naturally, Mathur was amazed. And he said to Sri Ramakrishna, yes, Father, I am defeated. Soon, you have time? So then I will just couple of more incidents, like one incident which happened when they were in Kashi. I wanted to read that one. Yeah. So in 1885, in 1868, Mathur and his family took Sri Ramakrishna on a pilgrimage, like to Kashi and Mathura and Devgar and different places. So there, while they are in Kashi, there are many incidents which happen in Kashi, but I will just want to mention one important one. One day, Mathur took Sri Ramakrishna on a boat trip for a view of the city from Ganges. As they approached Manikarnika cremation ground, Sri Ramakrishna had a vision. He rushed to the edge of the boat and then went into Samadhi. The boatman was afraid that he would fall and they can run, and then they ran to catch him. But Master stood there motionless, and Mathur and Hruday stood by him without touching him. Sri Ramakrishna later described his vision. That the vision is that the Divine Mother was sitting next to the funeral prey, untying the knots that bound the soul to the world, while Shiva was worshipping, whispering in the ear of the departed person a mantra giving immediate liberation. The Pandits were amazed when they heard about this vision, which went beyond even the description in the scriptures. So then I want to put last one incident where so once Mathur had a large abscess and was bedridden for a long time in Calcutta residence. He desperately wanted to see Master, but Sri Ramakrishna would not come. The Master told Mathur's messengers that he had no power to cure the abscess. His visit would be of no avail. At last, after repeated requests from Mathur, he came. When Mathur saw him, he said, "Father, give me little dust of your feet." Sri Ramakrishna said, What good it will do? Will it cure your abysses?" Mathur said, "Father, am I so mean? Do you think that I want the dust of your feet to cure my abscess? Doctors are there for that purpose. I want the dust of your feet in order to cure the ocean of Maya." So hearing this, Sri Ramakrishna merged into Samadhi. Mathur then put his head on the feet of Sri Ramakrishna and received his blessings. And he recovered shortly. Once, while in ecstatic mood, Ramakrishna said to Mathur, "As long as you are alive, I shall be in Dakshineshwar." Mathur turtled to hear that because he knew it was the Divine Mother herself who was protecting him, protecting not only him but also his family. He humbly said, "Why do you say so, Father? My wife and my son Dwaraka are also very much devoted to you." "All right," said the master. "I shall remain as long as your wife and Dwaraka are alive." And as a matter of fact, they all passed away by the time Sri Ramakrishna left Dakshineshwar in 1885. Soon, soon Mathur's part of Sri Ramakrishna's divine drama come to an end. On 14th July 1871, he died of typhoid fever after a short illness. Sri Ramakrishna did not go to see him while he was ill, but sent Hruday every day except the last. That day, Mathur was taken to Kali Ghat, a holy place in the South Calcutta. Sri Ramakrishna meanwhile became observed in deep samadhi in his room for a couple of hours, while his spirit went forth to help Mathur attain the goal. At 5 p.m., Sri Ramakrishna came out of samadhi and said to Hruday, the companion of Divine Mother, took Mathur with a love and care into their celestial chariot, and his soul has ascended to the sphere of Mother. Later that night, the news reached Dakshineshwar that Mathur had indeed passed away at 5 p.m. So Mathur's service to Master is now legendary. In later years, Sri Ramakrishna never tried of telling the devotees about him. Once one of the devotees asked Master, "Sir, what became of Mathur after death? Surely he wasn't have to be born again, would he?" The Master replied, "Perhaps he has been born as a king somewhere. He still had desire for enjoyment." Then he changed the subject. But no matter what happened to Mathur after his death, he undoubtedly loved and served Master with all his heart. More importantly, he realized who the Master was. Once he said to Sri Ramakrishna, "Father, there is nothing inside you but God." Thank you.
It is very important to know these personalities because they help us to understand Sri Ramakrishna and his divine play more profoundly, and it is very difficult to shorten any of these personalities' life and to give in a very short time. And I'm sure Lokesh ji really worked hard to give us a short information about Mathuranath Babu. Now, let us have a variety in our program. So I request Toby to give us a musical offering. And let us relax to hear his beautiful rendition.
Om. Om Sitaram. Om Radha Krishna. Om Sharada Ramakrishna. Om Sitaram. Om Radha Krishna. Om Sharada Ramakrishna. With loving arms you tenderly embraced those who sought your love. With soothing voice you spoke to those who came near for comfort's sake. You welcomed all with open arms and made them your very own, and never turned away a weary soul from your open door. What a blessing to have seen your face. What a blessing to receive your grace. If only we had known you, Holy Mother, Holy Mother. Patiently you served our Master, Sri Ramakrishna, with a heart filled with adoration through all the tribulation. You welcomed all with open arms and made them your very own, and never turned away a weary soul from your open door. What a blessing to have seen your face. What a blessing to receive your grace. If only we had known you, Holy Mother, Holy Mother, Holy Mother.
Thank you, Toby, for this prayerful rendition. So we'll progress. She was the first woman disciple of Swamiji, the Swami Vivekananda, and Swamiji named her as dedicated to the God. And also, she was an Indian freedom fighter. I request Kavita Ma to represent her and tell us how she was influenced by Swamiji. Kavita Ma, please.
Namaste, everyone.
So Sister Nivedita was unique in today's reading in the sense that she wasn't Ramakrishna's direct disciple, but she was the disciple of Ramakrishna's foremost disciple, Swami Vivekananda. So I'll read a little bit about her early life and her relationship with Swamiji, and then her loving, tender relationship with the Holy Mother. So Nivedita was born Margaret Noble in 1867 in Northern Ireland. Both her father as well as grandfather were Wesleyan priests, while her maternal grandfather was a respected participant of the Irish national movement. Margaret's early life was spent in considerable deprivation. At age 10, she lost her father and she studied in a charitable institution at Halifax in North England. When she was 17, she began working as a teacher to take care of her mother and younger siblings. She taught in many different places in England as well as Wales, and by 25, she had started a school of her own in Wimbledon. She had made a name for herself as a respected experimental educationalist, and she was instrumental in spreading the concept of kindergarten in the West at the time. Her success in this field, as well as writing abilities on themes of early childhood education and women's issues, brought her in touch with the intellectual creme de la creme of London, largely through the membership of the Sesame Club, founded by Lady Ripon. But Margaret's life was to undergo a transforming event that was to change her entire future course. It was when she was invited through the social circle of the Sesame Club to a tea talk at a select private gathering on a cold Sunday afternoon in November 1895 to hear a young 32-year-old Indian yogi who had made considerable reputation in America in the preceding 2 years. Margaret had great devotion for Christ, but many other Christian doctrines she was finding untenable with science. In her pursuit for deeper meaning, she had studied natural sciences as well as Buddhism, but deep within her, she pined for greater fulfillment for her inner being. Swami Vivekananda impressed upon her mind some deep ideas, like the essential purity and nobility of the humankind, its oneness, lifting up Margaret's mind. His thoughts were universal with human being at the center, and also his assertion that the time had come for nations to exchange their ideals just as they exchanged commodities. His message was based on what she regarded as the best and highest in human nature, and his words were also a call to action for serving suffering humanity, an invitation for sacrificing one's life for the good of others. This was what he said the earth's best and bravest were born for. She recounted later, I had recognized the heroic fiber of the man and decided to make myself a servant of his love for his own people. But it was his character to which I had thus done obeisance. As a religious teacher, I saw that although he had a system to offer, nothing in that system would claim him for a moment if he found that truth led elsewhere. After listening to the Swami a few times that year, and again the following year when the Swami returned from America, Margaret became a dedicated volunteer for him. It was then that he suggested that he has plans for the women of his country in which he thought she could be of help. That moment, she knew she had found the calling of her life. She was signing up her whole life for a mission that had high degree of uncertainty in unfamiliar conditions. So Margaret arrived in India in January 1898, and for the next 9 months, she got intensive training from Swamiji, who inspiringly opened the magical maze of India before her. On 25th March, Margaret received Diksha, spiritual initiation, into a life of spirituality and service. Her life was offered to India by her guru and was given the name Nivedita, the offered one. They also undertook a journey for 5 months across the northern and western parts of the country, where ideas of religion, history, geography, ethnology poured out of the master's lips in an inexhaustible stream, and the manifestly powerful feeling that Swamiji had for his country made way into the deepest chambers of Margaret's heart. In India, she knew that she had found her soul's home and destiny. Now, a little bit about her interactions with Holy Mother. Holy Mother's life is a meeting point of the ancient and the modern. The master taught her to adjust according to time, place, and person. In Dakshineshwar, Sri Ramakrishna had a vision that he described to Holy Mother. I was in the land of the white people. Their skin is white, their hearts are white, and they're simple and sincere. It is a very beautiful country. I think I shall go there. Holy Mother's relationship with Nivedita was sweet and touching, yet awe-inspiring. From the very beginning, Nivedita occupied a special place in Holy Mother's heart. During Nivedita's first visit to Holy Mother, Swamiji was a little bit apprehensive. Holy Mother had been born and brought up in an Orthodox Brahmin family in a village. Western etiquette was unfamiliar to her, and she did not know English. How would she receive his Western disciples? Swamiji sent his disciple, Swami Swarupananda, as an interpreter. When he introduced Nivedita to Holy Mother, she asked her name. Nivedita replied, "My name is Miss Margaret Elizabeth Noble." Swarupananda translated Holy Mother's Bengali. "My child, I shall not be able to utter such a long name. I think I will call you Cookie, baby." So Nivedita said joyfully, "Yes, yes, I'm Mother's baby." She then went to Swamiji and said, "Mother blessed me by touching my head, allowed me to bow down touching her feet, offered prasad, and she would call me Cookie." Swamiji was overjoyed. Nivedita began to learn Bengali from Swami Swarupananda so that she could speak with Holy Mother directly. Afterwards, Nivedita moved to 16 Bospara Lane and started a school for girls at Swamiji's request. On 13th November 1898, Holy Mother inaugurated the school and blessing it, saying, "May the Divine Mother of the universe bless the school. May the girls trained here be ideals for society." Almost every day, Nivedita would visit Holy Mother and take the dust off her feet. Every Sunday, she would come to clean Holy Mother's room by dusting the bed, sweeping the floor, polishing the glass panes in the doors and windows. Nivedita had taken up this work as her important duty. She was eager to provide even the smallest convenience or comfort to the mother. Nivedita did not have much money, but she wanted to buy things for Holy Mother. She was mainly supported by Sarah Bull and Josephine MacLeod. Pravrajika Bharati Prana noted, Whenever Sister Nivedita visited the mother, I saw the sister seated absorbed for a long time in front of the mother. She would bow down to the mother with full prostration, and an indescribable wave of bliss would flow over her entire face. It seemed like a joyful child closely looking at the face of his or her mother. Once, the mother presented the sister a palm leaf fan with woolen lace around it, which she had made herself. Having that fan made from the mother's hand, she was beside herself and exclaimed, "This fan has been made by Mata Devi, Holy Mother, and she's given it to me." This she repeated again and again and touched that fan with her head and chest. And to those who were present there, including myself, the sister touched that fan to their heads. Observing her exuberant joy, the mother remarked, "Do you see how Nivedita is thrilled having this trivial thing? Ah, how simple she is and what deep faith she has, as if she's a goddess. How much devotion she has for Naren. Because he is born in this country, she left her home and family and has come to do his work with her heart and soul. What a devotion to the Guru. What love for this country." Once, Nivedita had given Holy Mother a small German silver box in which she kept locks of Sri Ramakrishna's hair. She used to say, "Whenever I look at the box at the time of worship, I'm reminded of Nivedita." In one of her trunks, Holy Mother kept an old tattered silk scarf that her attendant wanted to throw away. "No, child," she said, "Nivedita gave it to me with great love. Let us preserve it." She then took the scarf in hand, scattered some black cumin seeds, which acted like mothballs, in the folds as a preservative, and laid it carefully back in the trunk. She remarked, "The very sight of the scarf reminds me of Nivedita. What a wonderful girl she was." Nivedita had penetrating eyes, a brilliant mind, indomitable energy, and deep spirituality. She observed that although Holy Mother had no formal education, her dealings with people and her teachings were beautiful, Catholic, practical, and appealing. Holy Mother's divine love and affection, strong common sense, and sweet personality captivated her. When Nivedita passed away, Holy Mother shed tears and said, "What sincere devotion Nivedita had. She never considered anything too much that she might do for me. She often came to me at night. Seeing that light struck my eyes, she put a shade of paper around the lamp. She would prostrate herself before me with great tenderness and take the dust off my feet with her handkerchief. I felt that she hesitated even to touch my feet. As the women devotees present expressed their sorrow at Nivedita's death, Holy Mother said, "All creatures cry for a great soul." Look at Nivedita, a Western girl, came to our country and worked happily, forbearing insult and harassment, and also enduring so much discomfort, she tried to educate her children. When she visited some homes to get their children for her school, she was humiliated. Some did not allow her to go inside their homes, and some allowed her in, but later purified the place by sprinkling Ganges water. She saw everything, but did not mind. She left the place with a smiling face. There was no bounden necessity for her to educate the girls of our country by enduring such insult and ill treatment and ruining her life little by little. You see, my daughter Nivedita had such a wonderful mind that she took over the responsibility to teach our girls on her own shoulder because her guru, Narain, wanted and asked her to do it. She did not care for physical suffering and discomfort, insult, and incivility of our people. For whom she dedicated her life, they treated her contemptuously. Under such circumstances, could the women of our country sacrifice such a great extent for the sake of their guru? They would say, "We don't care." So I say that except the master, no one knows or understands how, when, what, and through whom he makes one work. Like her master, Narain, who passed away at 39, Nivedita too exhausted herself and with a broken health passed away in Darjeeling on 13th October 1911, a fortnight before she could complete 44 years. At the place of her cremation in Darjeeling is an inscription saying, "Here reposes Sister Nivedita, who gave her all to India." Thank you.
Sister was a mind-born, great, brave disciple of Swamiji who dedicated herself completely for the Indian development. Thank you very much for your representations, Kavitama. Now will let us progress further. Time is our governor. A Bengali poet who describes Sri Ramakrishna's life through his poem. Swami Vivekananda highly appreciated this work. So I request Thomas, yes, to share about this poet and poem on Sri Ramakrishna.
I won't read the poem today, but Akshay Kumar Sen was very poor and had a very lowly education out in the village. And yet he not only wrote this poem, very large poem, a very devotional poem, very bhakti poem, and like a long ballad. But he also wrote two other long books. So he became quite a well-known writer about Ramakrishna. As I was reading about him too, I thought, well, maybe he was an inspiration of Swami Chitanananda because of all the books he wrote. Anyway, namaste, everyone. Let's see. He was born in 1854. He died in 1923. He lived in the villages, as I said, nearby Calcutta, and then he wanted to get some work, so he went to found work at the Tagore estate, and then he got connected with Ramakrishna through that, the people that were at that estate there. And let's see. Sorry. Anyway, on Saturday, probably in the early part of 1885, Mahimachran Chakrabarti arranged a festival and invited Sri Ramakrishna and the devotees to his house at 100 Kasipur Road in North Calcutta. Akshay heard that Devendra was planning to attend the function and that Dehindra was going with him. His heart was pounding, for it was unbearable for him to wait any longer to see the Paramahamsa. He really wanted to see him, and he was very devotional, very kind of spirited, and really just, he only had very one-minded. He wanted what Ramakrishna had to give him, and he really wanted to see him. So they went to that party, and then after the first meeting, Akshay longed to see the master again, and his mind was absorbed in thoughts of him. A couple of days later, Akshay had the opportunity to go to Dakshineswar with a friend. This time, Sri Ramakrishna asked Akshay many things about his life, including whether or not he was a Brahmo. Anyway, the Brahmo devotee, yeah. Generally, the master did not allow Akshay to touch his feet, a refusal that hurt him greatly. Instead, Sri Ramakrishna would say, "Let your mind be purified, then you may do so." Nonetheless, after 3 visits, Akshay was convinced that if anyone could give him the vision of Krishna, it was Sri Ramakrishna. Later, he realized that Krishna and Ramakrishna were one and the same. He wrote in his Sri Ramakrishna Mahima, one of his books, "I neither talked with Ramakrishna nor asked any questions, but this I knew, that whoever received the touch of the master on his chest would lose outer consciousness, and in that state would see Krishna. Expecting this, I continued to visit him. Not only that, whenever I would see him, I would feel myself as a different person. I used to think how it would be when the master, out of mercy, touched my chest. Many days passed, but he did not fulfill my desire. I used to go to him with great hope and return home with tearful eyes and disappointment. I talked to him only twice in my whole life. One day, seeing him alone, I said, 'Master, I am blind,' I mean ignorant. To this, the master replied, 'God exists.' The master, what Ramakrishna meant is you might be blind, but God has eyes to see you. Another day, I carried an ice cream cone for master, but he did not touch it. I asked, 'Master, why do you not eat the ice cream? I feel terrible.' He answered with a smile, 'If you had brought the ice cream at noontime, I would have eaten it. But I have been sick, and if I had eaten the cold thing that night, so I would have been sick if I had eaten the cold thing that night. So I did not.' The way the master treated me, if he had treated any other person in that way, he would never have returned. So many devotees touched his feet, and yet whenever I would try touching me, he would withdraw his feet and sometimes even move back saying, 'All right, all right.' The master used to speak about abstruse spiritual matters, and I could not follow what he meant. So I would sit silently in a corner with my eyes always on him." On January 1886, Sri Ramakrishna became the Kalipatu, the wish-fulfilling tree, and blessed many devotees, saying, "Be illumined." The occasion was the master's afternoon walk in the Kosipur garden. After a while, the master came down to the semi-ecstatic state and touched the devotees each one by one. This act created great emotional fervor and excitement among the devotees. Some received the vision of their chosen deity. Some experienced awakening of Kundalini. Some felt unspeakable bliss. And others, out of ecstasy, began to laugh, cry, and shout. Akshay watched the entire scene from a distance. Then suddenly, the master's eyes fell on Akshay, and he called him, "Hello!" Akshay ran to the master, who touched his chest with his hand and whispered a mantra in his ear. At once, Akshay experienced the effect of the master's blessing. He could not contain the onrush of bliss and was unable to withstand such an upsurge of emotion. He fell to the ground, his limbs twisted as if he were deformed, and he burst into tears.
Thomas? Thank you very much, Thomas. Now, he was very intimate to Sri Ramakrishna and recorder of his counsel. He was retained by Sri Ramakrishna as his scribe. I request Shayan to share who he was and how this happened.
Hello. ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ते भूरिदा यनाः. Srimad Canto 10, Chapter 31, Sloka 9. It means, O Lord, your words, like sweet nectar, refresh the afflicted. Your words, which poets have sung in verses, vanquish the sins of the worldly. Blessed are they who hear of you, and blessed indeed are they who speak of you. How great is their reward. This shloka has been included by Mahendranath Gupta in the beginning of each volume of the original Bengali gospel that he wrote. He wrote the gospel in 5 volumes and published them accordingly. First volume, 1904, second volume, 1908, third in 1910, then fourth again in 1914, and the final one in 1932. Now, interestingly, our Portland Vedanta Society is older than the last volume of Sri Ramakrishna's Kathamrita. As the Bengali saying goes, that it is Kathamrita. Katha means words, Amrita means primordial soup that gives us immortality. So these are eternal words which, when we hear, gain immortality. That is how he thought about the book. Now, as we have seen in history, that gospel writers have come with the teacher. Christ himself had 12 apostles, and John and Matthew, whose gospels are there in the New Testament, came with him. Chaitanya Deva came with 6 Goswamis who actually talk about the gospel of Chaitanya Deva. Same here, Aim actually came with Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna recognized Aim at first sight. He himself said, I recognized you on hearing you read the Chaitanya Bhagavat. You are my own, the same substance, like father and son. Before you came here, you didn't know who you were. Now you will know. Once in a vision, I saw Gauranga and his devotees singing Kirtan in the Panchavati. I think I saw Balaram there and you too. So now M, and there are very interesting stories about him. He was born in 1854. 14 July, he was 18 years younger than Sri Ramakrishna. Now, when he was 4 years old, during the chariot festival of Jagannath, he visited Mahesh, and from there he went to the Dakshineshwar temple. He remembers a memory of that it was very new temple at that time. It was glistening, and then he suddenly lost hold of his mother, and he got lost. Now, he did not know what to do. He was very stressed. At that time, he found a extremely handsome Brahmin came out of the temple and touched his head and consoled him. That Brahmin said, whose child is this? Where has his mother gone? M later recollected that he probably met Sri Ramakrishna when he was of the age of 4, and he was the priest of the Kali temple at that time. Now, when he was, there is another incident. So, on 14th July 1885, Sri Ramakrishna was in Balaram Bose's house. Today it is a temple, Balaram Mandir. Now, on that day, there was an earthquake in Kolkata. Now, when the earthquake happened, the devotees were very frightened. At that time, after the earthquake reverberations were out, M suddenly told the devotees that you guys stood in the upstairs, you should have all gone downstairs. That is usually what you should do. Then the master said, such is the fate of the house under whose roof one lives, and still people are so egotistic. Now he says to M that, do you remember the great storm of the month of Ashwin, which is in 5th October 1864? M suddenly remembers this and he says, yes, master, I remember that. I was only 9 or 10 years old, and when this extreme storm happened, I was alone in a small room. I was crying and I was praying to God for saving me. He suddenly remembered that he has never shared this story with Sri Ramakrishna. He was only 10 years old, and Sri Ramakrishna did not even knew him at that time. So he then understood that actually he was praying to Sri Ramakrishna when he was 10 years old, and it was Sri Ramakrishna who was the guru, had been protecting him from that time. So whether it is an earthquake or whether it is a storm that he has been fearing, Sri Ramakrishna was with him continuously. Now, M was a brilliant student. He actually stood second in his class in his secondary education in Hare School, and then he came third in 1875 when he graduated from Presidency College, and he was very good at English. He was a student of C.H. Tawney, who later on wrote about Sri Ramakrishna. He married Nikunja Devi, who was a cousin of the Brahmo leader Keshab Chandra Sen. And he then took up the job of a teacher. He served as headmaster of various schools. And when he is meeting Sri Ramakrishna for the first time, he was the headmaster of the Sham Bazar branch of the Vidyasagar school. Now, in 1882, he first met Sri Ramakrishna. How? He had a nephew called Sidhu. Now, Sidhu's father was Ishwar Kaviraj, who was the physician of Sri Ramakrishna. So, Sidhu actually took him to Sri Ramakrishna. The first meeting is very interesting. I will just read a small excerpt from the Gospel. They, M and Sidhu, arrived at the main gate at dusk and went straight to Sri Ramakrishna's room. And there they found him seated on a wooden couch facing the east. While a smile on his face, he was talking of God. The room was full of people, all seated on the floor, drinking in his words in deep silence. M stood there speechless and looked upon. It was as if he were standing where all the holy places have met, and as if Shukadeva himself were speaking the word of God, or as if Sri Chaitanya were singing the name and glories of the Lord in Puri. M looked around him with wonder and said to himself, "What a beautiful place, what a charming man, how beautiful his words are." So, in the second visit, M's ego, that he was very hardcore Western educated, was broken by Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna said that spiritual wisdom is the only thing that is valuable in our life. Now, here we find M's humility. He was extremely humble. We get like multiple examples of that thing. People usually hide their shortcomings. They do not want to talk about the weaknesses. Gospel is a book where M clearly writes how many times he has been scolded by Sri Ramakrishna. And he actually writes what was his reaction to that scolding. He continuously writes that. Then he, from the age of 8, he had the habit of writing a diary. And that diary is full of his own devotional stories. He would write like this, that I woke up in the morning and offered my prayers to my parents. Then I started going towards school and I offered my prayers to Mother Kali in that temple. Then I offered my prayers to Mother Shitala. Later on, people asked him, how did you write the gospel? And he said, well, I was a diary writer from the age of 8. So I have been practicing for 30 years of my life how to write diaries. Right? He eventually wrote a diary where we find God in human body form conversing with Mother Kali. Our ears are deaf to hear what Mother Kali is saying, but we can hear through his words what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. So the other part of the conversation with Mother Kali is something that we can hear through him. Now, M was a teacher, as we discussed, but look at his pool of students. He actually taught 4 of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna: Rakhal, Swami Brahmananda; Subodh, Swami Subodhananda; Sharada, Swami Sharadananda; and then Baburam, Swami Premananda. And a whole lot of the householder devotees like Purno, Binod, Bonkim, Techchandra, Khirod, Narayan, all of them. So, and I talked about his humility. See, he is well known because of these people as Master Mahasaya or the teacher. But in the entire gospel, you would barely see him writing his own name, Mahendranath Gupta. You would see him writing as Mani Mohan, Englishman, because he was English educated, and all sorts of things. But he would not talk about himself there. He is well known. Most of the time, he would call himself Sri Ma or Sri M, and that's how we know him. Now, there is a very interesting thing about him, that he actually lived the life of an ideal householder. So once he met with Sri Ramakrishna, he felt that he has to renounce his family life and he has to become a monk. So he went and talked to Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna told him, "You are well established in God already. Is it good to give up all?" Sri Ramakrishna said, "God binds the Bhagavata Pandit to the world with one tie. Otherwise, who would remain to explain the sacred book? He keeps the Pandit bound for the good of men. That is why the Divine Mother has kept you in the world." Sri Ramakrishna says about life of householder, ideal life. He says that let the boat be in the water, but let there be no water in the boat. Let the aspirant live in the world, but let there be no worldliness in him. M actually represents that life. These words, M is living that life. He once Swami Subodhananda, at that time Subodh, was sent by Sri Ramakrishna to meet M. Now Subodhananda said, "He is an householder. I want to become a monk. What do we have to learn from him?" And then Sri Ramakrishna said, "Well, he is only going to speak of my words. So go and learn from him." When he went and dictated this story, M said that he lives by an ocean and he has some pitchers full of water of that ocean. Whenever a devotee comes, he lets them drink from that water jug. And the thing is that Sri Ramakrishna actually wanted him to write the gospel. Initially, when he wrote the diary, he told other people that he is writing for himself. But then, once he went to Holy Mother and read that part from the diary, Holy Mother said, "Why don't you go ahead and write it?" So he decided to write the book. But the seed was already sowed by Sri Ramakrishna. We would see many times he would actually wait for M to come before starting an important discussion on some important topic. He would sometimes ask M, "Have you understood it correctly?" If M replies and that was not the correct understanding, he would repeat. 9th November 1884 entry in the Gospel is such an example of how Sri Ramakrishna actually sowed the seeds that he would write. Post 1905, and after Sri Ramakrishna's death, he would continuously visit the Baranagar monastery. Whenever a monk would show up at his place, he would try to feed and serve them. But post 1905, he actually left up his headmaster position and he purchased an institution called the Morton Institution. He started living in Jhamapukur Lane and we later on moved to 50 Harma Street. There, he would talk about Sri Ramakrishna to everyone who ever visited. He also went on to pilgrimage to Varanasi, Vrindavan, Ayodhya, and to Rishikesh, Haridwar, Kankal with mother in 1912 when mother was having her own pilgrimage. But he did not like going to these places much. He felt his own guru lived in Dakshineshwar, so he would go and bow down in Dakshineshwar again and again, where he experienced the divine play of the master. Now, in his last days, so as I said, that 1932, he passed away on 4th June 1932. But that is also the year when the last volume of the Gospel came. So he was very old and he was sick at that time. So his health was delicate. He never gave up working. Swami Nityatmananda wrote of a touching incident in his memoirs. Nityatmananda writes, "I was responsible for the printing of the Kathamrita while it was at the printers, but I had many things to do and was unable to finish the proofreading in time. At 1 a.m. in the night, I saw a light in M's room. I entered and found he was reading the proofs of the gospel by a kerosene lantern. He was not well at all, and moreover, as he was working at an odd hour, his eyes were watering. I was pained at this. I lovingly chastised him, and he replied with affection, 'People are finding peace by reading this book and Master's immortal message. It is inevitable that the body will meet its end, so it is better that is used for spreading the peace to others.'" He described his life's goal in these words. His body was there only to make us hear Sri Ramakrishna's words. So now it's a very interesting fact that our tradition of a very early Vedantic teacher, Sri Ramanuja, who talks about 5 forms of meditation. It's one of the highest forms of worship. Out of them, 2 are meditation on the form and meditation on the divine plane. Without M, we would not have been able to perform half of this. His outstanding literary capabilities give us an idea of the time and how Sri Ramakrishna is dancing in the temples. He is singing songs. He is going into his ecstatic bliss. He is talking to his mother. Without him, we would not be able to see such a television program of Sri Ramakrishna and his divine play. In Chaitanya Charita, so Chaitananda ji has beautifully included this. In Sri Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is a word in Bengali. It says, অদ্যপিহ সেই লীলা করে গোড়ারায় কোনো কোনো ভাগ্যবানে দেখিবারে পায়. That means Chaitanya is still performing his divine play. Only the fortunate ones can see it. Sri Ramakrishna is still performing his divine play thanks to him that he has made us fortunate to see it. He told Josephine MacLeod. So Josephine MacLeod asked him that what was your experience with Sri Ramakrishna? Then he answers that Sri Ramakrishna is embodied Satchidananda. He is embodied with Christ and Chaitanya Deva in one body. He has the intellect of Shankara and the heart of Chaitanya. He says that what did Sri Ramakrishna give him? M says, he gave me burning faith. So with that, I pray from all of us to the holy feet of that embodied Satchidananda and offer up our prayers and our Purusharthas. Jai Sri Ramakrishna.
Our revered Chaitanananda Ji Maharaj has written a beautiful book on the life history of Mahendranath Gupta. So I request you all to refer to read more about him. In fact, yeah, M inspired many spiritual aspirants to join our Ramakrishna order later. So thank you, Shine, for your profound researchful deliverance. Now it's just now another variety from Paul. Yeah. So a musical offering by Paul.
I have no memory, so I have words. I had a memory at some point. I don't. Yeah. No. Blame college. Too many mics. It's confusing. All right. There we go. Little fort. I think I'm getting lightheaded with that mask all the time. Seriously. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your help. Okay. Seriously, it's weird, but unfortunately necessary at the time we're living. I'll point it towards the law. There. Close enough. This is a song for the mother, by the mother, to the mother. 2 and 4 are the same. So she wrote the lyrics and I put some chords, and I'll start it with the bridge and then I have a little accompaniment, so we'll get there. Let's see. No one is a stranger, my child. The whole world is your own. No one is a stranger, my child. The whole world is your own. The world is your own. of the wicked and the mother of the good. I'm the mother to those who know this truth, to those who misunderstood. Never fear when you're in trouble, 'cause you're never really alone. Say to yourself, I have a mother, and you'll never be, never be, never be far from home. Weep and sincerely pray, oh Lord, draw me towards you. Give me peace of mind, give me devotion. By doing so constantly, no doubt you'll find you gradually attain peace of mind. I'm the mother of the wicked and the mother of the good. I'm the mother to those who know this truth and those who misunderstood. Never fear when you're in trouble, 'cause you're never really alone. Say to yourself, I have a mother, and you'll never be, never be, never be, never be far from home. Pray to God with tears in your eyes, and you'll remain calm amidst the trials of life. I tell you one thing, if you want peace of mind, don't find fault with others, rather look inside and see your own faults. No one is a stranger, my child, the whole world is your own. No one is a stranger, my child, the whole world is your own. No one is a stranger, my child, the whole world is your own. The whole world is your own. I'm the mother of the wicked and the mother of the good. I'm the mother to those who know this truth and to those who misunderstood. Never fear when you're in trouble, because you're never really alone. Say to yourself, I have a mother, you'll never be, never be, never be far from home.
Her warm welcome to Holy Mother, and I'm sure she is already here, and we are her children. And thank you, Paul, for your sweet and pleasant rendition. Sri Ramakrishna honored her as perfect soul, and himself gave her ochre cloth. She was the first woman disciple, monastic disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. We shall hear from Sri Jama about this inspiring personality.
Namaste, everyone. One day, a holy man was on his way to visit the Divine Mother at Calcutta in South Calcutta when he was stopped by an old man who wanted to pay her respect to him. Gaurima, who was then 9 years old, was playing nearby with some other girls. When she saw that holy man, she felt an irresistible attraction and rushed over to him and bowed down. The holy man asked, "Your friends are playing and you have come to me. Why?" Gaurima replied, "Oh, they love to play that way, but I don't like it. I felt an attraction in my heart, so I came to you." The holy man touched the little girl's head and blessed her, saying, "May you attain devotion to Krishna." Gaurima traveled to several places like Devaprayag, Rudraprayag, Kedarnath, and Badrinath, etc., and did severe tapas. Gaurima's 20 years of travel gave her first-hand knowledge of Indian people, especially of women. At last, she felt an inner urge to fulfill the mission that Ramakrishna had designated to her. In 1895, she founded that Sri Sharadeshwari Ashram for women on the bank of Ganges in Barakpur, 14 miles north of Calcutta. There were 25 members of the ashram, and Gaurima trained them following the ancient tradition of India. Everyone rose early in the morning, bathed, and then practiced japa and meditation. After that, they did the household chores and studied under Gaurima's supervision. The ashram was designed like a village that touched huts surrounded by trees. There was no school, so Gaurima held classes either under a tree or on the veranda of the touched hut. The Holy Mother once visited the ashram and blessed Gaurima's pioneering work. Once the Holy Mother praised Gaurima's love and steadfast devotion, saying, "It is amazing how Gaurdasi has passed her life holding in stone image of Lord." Gaurima instead treated the image as her living husband. One afternoon, she was trying to take a nap, but she was restless. Then she remembered that she had not offered any milk to the Lord for lunch. As a result, his meal was not complete and he was not getting any sleep. Immediately, she got up, brought a glass of milk to the shrine, and offered it to Lord. Then she was able to get some rest. On another occasion, Gaurima was ill, so she offered the Lord some sweets and fruit instead of regular meal and went to bed early. At midnight, she got up and went to the kitchen to make up some fried bread for the Lord. Hearing some noise in the kitchen, a student rushed there. Gaurima explained with a smile, "After a short sleep, the Lord told me he was hungry, so I started cooking." Although the ashram was at Barakpur, Gaurima had to depend on financial help from Calcutta devotee. Because of this, in 1911, she transferred the ashram to North Calcutta, to a place not far from Holy Mother's residence. 50 dedicated women joined the ashram, and 300 girls received their education there. Gaurima had to raise funds, supervise the building construction, do household chores, and look after the training of the workers. Some of the masters, direct disciple, and some devotees helped her financially, but it was not enough. Once she organized a meeting and invited judges and many distinguished people of Calcutta in order to explain to them the aims and objectives of Sharadeshwari Ashram. She emphasized that education for women was essential for the revival of society and also reminded them the ideas and contributions of her great women of ancient India. Gradually, some generous and noble minded people came forward to help her with her work. She also traveled to various parts of the country and lectured on the need for more women's education in India. She had a magnanimous personality and the power to convince people. Although she was a penniless nun, her faith in Master brought success. One morning in Calcutta, Gaurima went with some of her students to bathe in the Ganges. After arriving there, she noticed that a girl was being carried away by the current of the river. Some people were watching the girl and lamenting, but they did nothing to rescue her. Gaurima scolded them and then quickly tied her cloth around her waist and jumped into the water, saying, "Victory to the Divine Mother." Her students screamed because they knew that Gaurima could not swim. In the meantime, two men also jumped into the water and they rescued the girl. Fortunately, Gaurima had not gone into the deep water. When she was practicing austerities in Triveni in Allahabad, a beautiful woman wearing expensive clothes and jewelry came to her one day and began to cry. "Why are you crying?" asked Gaurima. "Is there any hope for me, mother? What happened? Why are you so depressed?" The woman described her and life and moral lapses to Gaurima and then said, "Please tell me, how can I attain peace?" Gaurima told her, "The path of peace is extremely difficult. No one can tread on that path without shunning all cravings for worldly enjoyment. If you really want peace and bliss in your life, call on God. Don't look back. What has happened has happened. Forget it." After receiving some spiritual instructions from Gaurima, the woman threw her jewelry into the Yamuna, cut her long hair, put on an ordinary cloth, and left for Rishikesh to practice tapasya. Many years later, Gaurima met her again and was impressed by her transformation. Gaurima was a brave woman herself, and she wanted to see the quality in other women. Some women devotees knew that she sometimes dressed as a wandering monk in long robe and turban. One day, out of fun, they asked to see her in those clothes. Gaurima warned them that they would be frightened. Early one afternoon, Gaurima put on her robe and turban and with the bamboo staff in her hand appeared before those women when the men were away at work. Seeing a stranger in the inner apartment, the woman screamed. Gaurima then disclosed her identity and scolded them. "What is this? Why are you so afraid of men? When you saw a stranger enter the inner apartment, why didn't you throw something at him instead of screaming? Instead, isn't it possible for three women to push out one man? It's not enough for women to be good housewives. They must be strong and learn to protect themselves." Following what the master had asked to do, she became one of the pioneers of education for women and modern India.
Thank you, Sri Jama. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for there is the kingdom of heaven. He was humble and meek. He was absolutely free from me and mine, that is, lust and money. He was a perfect example of teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. I request Jyotima to express this inexpressible disciple of Sri Ramakrishna.
Namaste, everyone. I'll be reading about Nag Mahashay. It's scary when you read. How can anybody do what he has done? Is what you feel when you read. I know we've gone way over time. I'll try to keep it short. So let's see. There is a saying: "Gurus are available by thousands, but real disciples are very few." A real disciple is one who translates the teachings of his guru into the actions of his life. Durga Charan Nag was one such rare soul. Once he overheard Sri Ramakrishna say, "It is very difficult for doctors, lawyers, and brokers to advance on the path to God." Referring to doctors in particular, he said, "If the mind dwells on tiny drops of medicine, how can it conceive of the infinite?" Durga Charan was then practicing homeopathic medicine. He noticed that most of the time his mind was reflecting on the faces of his patients, and this disturbed his meditation. He therefore thought that the advice was meant for him. Immediately he resolved, "I will not make my living from that profession which is an obstacle to the realization of God." He returned home and that very day threw his medicine box and the medical books into the Ganga. How can we harmonize God and the world? How can we live in this world without being worldly? How can we love and not be attached? Is it necessary to renounce the world for God realization? What is the duty of a householder? What is the goal of human life? These and other vital questions Sri Ramakrishna answered for the modern world. He did so not only through the use of tales and parables, but also by quietly molding the lives of perfect exemplars of his teachings. The life of Durga Charan Nag is just such a model of an ideal householder. Sri Ramakrishna demonstrated to the modern world through him that a person can lead a married life and at the same time have the highest spiritual experience. According to Vedantic tradition, the life of a householder is based on spirituality. He should follow the path of truth and dedicate the results of all his actions to the Supreme Being. It is not an easy path. He is a true hero, said Sri Ramakrishna, who can perform all the duties of the world with his mind fixed on God. None but a very strong man could stop to admire a bridal procession moving while carrying a load of 2 mounts, 164 pounds, on his head. Sri Ramakrishna gives very beautiful examples, like perfect analogies. It was because of his extraordinary personality that Durgacharan Nag came to be known as Nag Mahashai. Nag was his surname, and Mahashai means great soul. An illumined soul is ever contented, ever blissful, ever free. He has no craving for heaven or for the world. He transcends the pairs of opposites. The Ashtavakra Samhita describes the signs of such a great soul. So this is our litmus test. So we can how far we have those desirous of worldly enjoyment. So I'm reading the Ashtavakra Samhita. Those desires of worldly enjoyment and those desirous of liberation both are found in this world. But rare indeed is the great souled one, Mahashay, who is not desirous of either enjoyment or liberation. Because the fact is that you are already that, the true one. It's because of that we are identified with the mind and the body that we consider ourselves limited. That is why the one who has truly realized knows that there is nothing like bondage or liberation. Swami Vivekananda once said about him, that is about Nag Mahashay, I have traveled many places in the world, but nowhere have I come across such a great soul as Nag Mahashay. Durgacharan Nag was born on August 21st, 1846, at Diobhog, a small village in that part of Bengal which is now Bangladesh. His father, Deen Dayal Nag, was a pious man who was employed for a modest salary by a large commercial firm in Kolkata. Although 2 daughters and another son were born to Deen Dayal, only Durgacharan and one of the daughters survived childhood. So basically, he had only one other sibling. Durgacharan lost his mother when he was 8 years old and was then brought up by an affectionate aunt. This aunt used to narrate to the boy at night tales from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Sometimes, after falling asleep, Durgacharan's dreams would vividly reproduce scenes from those tales. Other nights, he would see the forms of gods and goddesses in his dreams. In the mornings, when he described these dreams to his aunt, she would be filled with awe. I mean, you can even see that how important it is to give this kind of education, when children are growing up. I mean, you get to see so many lessons when you're reading the life of these great beings. Durgacharan was a handsome, modest, and sweet-natured boy. He was not very fond of sports, but occasionally, at the urging of his friends, he would join them in their games. His love of truth was so great that even in play or fun, he would never speak a lie. Literally, even before he met Sri Ramakrishna, he was doing what Sri Ramakrishna wanted. And if any of his friends did so, he would immediately have nothing to do with that person. He was often drafted as a mediator when a dispute arose among his playmates, and the boys, knowing his fairness, accepted his decision without question. Once, some mischievous boys insisted that he tell a lie so that they could win a game, but Durgacharan refused, and consequently they lost. Enraged, they dragged him through the rice field until his body was covered with cuts and bruises. He returned home in the evening in pain, but without a word of complaint against anyone. So, two great things that you see, that his love for truth and not pointing fingers at anyone. I will jump to another portion. Once, while returning home, Durgacharan, so just showing different aspects of him. Once, while returning home, Durgacharan encountered a ghost, but he did not become frightened. He thought to himself, I have not done any harm to him, so why should he harm me? As he hurried on his way, he heard the loud laughter of the ghost behind him, but did not look back. On another occasion, during the rainy season, he fell into a pond from a slippery road. He tried to climb out several times by holding the grass and the bushes of the slope, but failed. Finally, he stopped and began to chant the name of the Lord, and gaining new strength, he pulled himself out of the pond. I'll now. This is the last one because it's beautiful. People read about God. People read about God, talk about God, hear about God, like we are doing now. But how many really want to experience Him directly? This desire completely possessed Durgacharan. One day, his friend Suresh came to him with the news about Sri Ramakrishna, the saint at Dakshineshwar. They both decided to go immediately to Dakshineshwar and see him. They arrived there about 2 in the afternoon and inquired about the master. Pratap Hazra, a strange devotee, informed them that Sri Ramakrishna had gone to Chandanagar and asked him to come back another day. They were terribly disappointed and about to leave when they noticed someone inside a room beckoning them to enter. It was Sri Ramakrishna. I sometimes get very angry with Hazra. The master received them cordially and asked them about themselves. During the course of the conversation, he advised, live in the world like a mud fish. The fish lives in the mud, but its skin is always bright and shiny. Similarly, remain at home, unattached, and the stain of worldliness will not touch your mind. He asked them to meditate in the Panchavati Grove for some time, and then he took them to see the different temples. As they were leaving, Sri Ramakrishna said to them, come again. A relationship grows through frequent visits. I think he said that to, M also. The following week, they again went to meet Sri Ramakrishna. Welcoming them, he said, I'm very glad to see you. It is for you that I am here. So beautiful. Sri Ramakrishna is saying, I'm here for you all. He beckoned Durgacharan to sit near him and said, don't fear, my child. You have attained a very exalted state. The master then sent him out of the room to do some small task. When he left, the master turned to Suresh and remarked, did you notice? This man is like a blazing fire. Imagine Sri Ramakrishna is telling that about Nag Mahashai. And with this last one, I will end because I feel nothing more needs to be told. The next time, Durgacharan went to Dakshineshwar by himself. Sri Ramakrishna asked him, what do you think of me? He has asked this to all the devotees. What do you think of me? Durgacharan saluted him with folded hands and replied, you Nag Mahasaya is telling to Sri Ramakrishna, "You cannot hoodwink me anymore, Divine Master. Through your grace, I have come to know that you are that Supreme One." Jai Ramakrishna.
Thank you, Jyotima. I request now Terence to represent our gratitude to Holy Trio through impressions.
Thank you, Swami. We've all had a chance to listen to a number of representations and perceptions of our great master and mother, Holy Mother. I have been moved to say that I have only had one opportunity to meet an illumined soul, and that was Swami Seshananda, who is divine, in his divine way, opened my heart, opened my life, opened my being. And so I thought about what I was going to give my impressions, and I thought, why not give what Swami Seshananda gave to me about his impressions of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. And I think that summarizes everything that everyone said here today. So I'd like to share that with you. By the way, Swami Seshananda met 9 of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, and he met 4 of the people that we were talking about here today from the books that were being read. Sri Ramakrishna is the Rishi of our age. He has come to remind us why we have come here, wake us up from this long sleep of ignorance, and help us realize our perfection and infinite nature. Sri Ramakrishna symbolizes wisdom, while Holy Mother symbolizes grace and compassion, the 2 components of universality. You have to think it's pretty strange to think that 2 people from India would take over so many American lives in such a positive way and transform them. It's the universality of their message, the universality of their life that we're experiencing. Sri Ramakrishna represents Viveka Buddhi, discriminating intellect, and Holy Mother represents holy thoughts. When I say the world is becoming more ready for Sri Ramakrishna, I meant not that it will accept him as its Ishta or even as an avatar. Rather, it's more appropriate to think of Thakur as the method. Everything we heard today was pointing to that fact, that it's not so much what he said, it's how he communicated that to the person's heart. Sri Ramakrishna is a symbol of the method. Holy Mother is a symbol of grace. Without grace, nothing happens. We have the method we can practice all day, all night, but the grace has to come eventually. And it comes from the source of grace, which Mother is. Then he would conclude, Swami Seshananda would conclude with this very powerful comment, which has stuck with me all these years. Don't ever think for a moment, even for a minute, that Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother are not behind you. Sri Ramakrishna brought us here. He is behind all of us.
Thank you, Terence. We conclude with a tribute, song of self-surrender to Holy Trio, short meditation, and flower offering. My humble salutations and gratitude to you all. Let peace be with you all.
Please join me in this song. If you don't know the words, you'll realize them as we go along. Krishna Sharanam, Rama 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 Krishna Sharanam, Vipadi Kevalam, Vipadi Kevalam, Vipadi Kevalam, Vipadi Kevalam, Vipadi Kevalam, Rama Krishna Sharanam, 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 Sharanagatoham, 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 Rama Krishna Sharanam, 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 Namo Sri Gurave, Namo Sri Gurave, Namo Sri Gurave, Namo Namah. Namo Sri Gurave, Namo Sri Gurave, Namo Sri Gurave, Namo Namah. Rama Krishna Sharanam, 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 Rama Krishna, Rama Krishna, Jai Jai Rama Krishna, 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 Rama Krishna Sharanam, 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 Vipadi Kevalam, Vipadi Kevalam, Vipadi Kevalam, Vipadi Kevalam, Vipadi Kevalam, Vipadi Kevalam, Rama Krishna Sharanam, 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 Sharanagatoham, 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 Rama
Keep silence for 5 minutes, and then we'll offer flowers. Flowers will be kept here, and then we will offer. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Namastu. Jai Sri Guru Maharaj Ji ki Jai. Jai Mahamaya ki Jai. Jai Swami Ji Maharaj Ji ki Jai. Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. Sarve Santu Niramaya. Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu. Ma Kashchit Dukha Bhava. Let all be happy. Let all see what is auspicious. Let all be free from diseases, and nobody should be part of any afflictions. Oh, peace, peace, peace. Now you know, stand there. You gradually will come and offer. Yes, sure. Please. All are invited to have prasad.